Am I the asshole for cutting off my parents after my mom refused to care for me postpartum, even though she did it for my siblings? Throwaway account, and my English writing is really bad. Please bear with me. So I, 28 female, am 30 weeks pregnant with my first child and am about to move to another state, and mom has this thing where she takes care of my siblings when they give birth until they recover. She has done it for my older sister and my brother's wife, so I thought that she would do the same thing with me too, but a week ago she told me that she couldn't because it is too far away. We got into a fight about the whole thing, and I told her to get out of my house, and now we are not talking. Before you judge me and say that my mom isn't obligated to take care of me, I will tell you that it isn't about mom taking care of me. It was never about that. I am that one child in the family who nobody really cares about. My parents always claim that they love and treat us all equally, but man, is it obvious that they love me a little bit less than the others. I always thought that maybe I am adopted and that's why they don't care about me that much. Well, I am wrong because I am 100% theirs. It is always about how my other siblings are doing or how mom and dad are suffering, but it is never about me. It was never about me from the beginning. I rarely celebrate even if it is supposed to be my day. My birthdays? They rarely celebrated because mom and dad forgot, or they just threw everything in the house and called it a birthday. High school graduation party? Nope, my parents have already wasted a lot of money for my big brother's college graduation party, so they can't do that, but they will make sure to make it up to me. Do you think that ever happened? I will give you a minute or two. If you guessed no, then congrats, you guessed right. Yay! They shared the wedding expenses of my siblings' wedding, but since my husband came from a good family, they don't have to share wedding expenses. Not my words. I have always been the therapist who listens to my mom and dad's rough day, or the one who needs to help mom because my older siblings have a lot of school work to do, or because my younger siblings are too young to do that kind of work. They always tell me that I am a good daughter, but I am never the one who they brag about to their friends. I did everything in my power to make them proud, but my achievements will always be below my siblings. I have tried to talk to them about how I feel multiple times before, but the only thing I get is a hard scolding about how I was getting spoiled. I hated my life until I got out of that house, but I never had the courage to let go of them, thinking that they would change. Well, my mom just proved me wrong. Mind you that my older sister lives a whole ass ocean away from yo, but mom decided that taking a 10+ hour flight to another continent twice was not hard at all, but all of a sudden, and taking a 4-hour ride to my home was too much. Especially when I am in a place where I don't know anyone except my husband. I am so fucking tired of them putting everyone else above me. So, I will make things right between us until I leave because I don't want to end things on a bad note, and when I get to my new house, I will just cut all contact between us. I don't think that I have the energy to do all of this crap anymore, and besides, I have my lovely husband with me, so I will be alright and build myself a new family where I am truly appreciated and loved for who I am. Note, I am the third out of 5 children. My younger siblings are twins. Comments. Comment 1, NTA. Tell her you can't keep in touch, it is too far away. Comment 2, NTA. Yes, I agree with you. Make nice with your mom while you're visiting this time and minimize contact when you get back to your own home. It could be that your mother wants you to beg and plead. Oh mommy, pretty please, come help me, I need you. But my reaction is F that game playing. Put your energy on your husband and build a new support network where y'all live now. Comment 3. NTA. Put them on a strict information diet. Stay off socials, inform your husband and his family that you want nothing posted on social media. Do not let them know when the baby is born or when you go into labor. Do not answer the phone, respond to email, texts, etc. Put them on a ban list at the hospital if you have to. Gather more evidence of them singling you out, then when asked by others, you give them the full story. Maybe shame will cure them. Update, 3 months later. Hello. First, I would like to thank everyone for their kind advice. I was honestly shocked when I saw all of these messages. I really appreciate it. A lot has happened since my last post. I tried to call my parents but they were blocked and I couldn't reach them, but I was determined to get the closure that the younger version of me wanted. So I called my older brother and I asked him if we could meet up and talk about the situation. He told me that he won't meet up with me after what I've done to our mother, and he berated me saying that I was an ungrateful person and that mom is in a lot of stress and pain because of me. I told him that it wasn't fair for him to just assume that I was the villain and that he couldn't even understand my point of view because they didn't treat him like they treated me my whole life. He knew that they treated me like their personal chef, maid and therapist for years, but they couldn't even give me the love and attention that I wanted for once in my whole damn life. He basically screamed at me through the phone that I was a piece of trash for saying that, and that mom and dad treated us all equally, but I was just a damn narcissist who can't think about anyone but myself. I tried to talk, but my emotions got the better of him and I started breaking down on the phone and he hung up on me. I even started asking myself if I was really the narcissist that my family seemed to think of me. But my husband came to the rescue and helped me through all of this, but the doubt that maybe I was in the wrong still lingered in my head. I guess my brother told my parents that I called him because dad called about 2 days after that and asked me to meet up at their house. I was about to say no, but I couldn't because his voice was filled with remorse, so I thought that maybe, just maybe, we could get past the whole thing and I could drop the thought of cutting contact even if my mom doesn't want to help out. After like 3 days of talking to my dad, me and my husband went to their house to talk. I thought that it was going to be me, my husband and my parents talking, but they invited my brother and his wife. As soon as we sat, my dad started talking about how disappointed he was with me and that things shouldn't have led to this. I told him that he was right. Things shouldn't have escalated to where they are now, but I assumed that since mom helped take care of my sister and my brother's wife, she would do the same, but she just favorited everyone else above me and it was frustrating. I told them about how I felt for the past years and I told them everything that I said to you guys, but all of them acted like they didn't care, which honestly hurt like hell. I knew at that moment that I didn't mean anything to them, so why was I fighting to be a part of a family that didn't want me? My husband was going to speak, but I told him not to. Everyone gave their opinions about it, basically blaming me, and then dad asked me if I wanted to say anything to mom. I told her that I was sorry because I didn't want any type of bad blood between us before I close this chapter and move on with my life, but she didn't say anything back, and dad said that we needed some time cooling off and setting some boundaries, and I guess that was it between us. In the next 2 weeks we were packing and leaving the state. I didn't tell anyone about where my new house will be. Only once I got there and settled down did I write a long message about everything they did and how I felt, and at the end of the message I told them that I was completely cutting contact with my parents and older brother. I changed my phone number and blocked all of my family from my social media. And you know what? My life has never been this peaceful in a long time. I am happy about everything and my baby will arrive any day now. It is honestly stressful, but I love it so much. We hired a helper around the house because why not? Now my day consists of sleep, take a walk, eat some more, have back and hip pains, and repeat, which honestly isn't that bad. Thank you for reading comments. Comment 1. Sounds like you finally choose peace over drama. Wishing you all the happiness with your little one. Comment 2. Yup, sometimes family is just a title. You don't owe them anything if they don't treat you with love and respect. Comment 3. Blood doesn't mean loyalty. You gave them every chance, and they showed you exactly who they are. Now you get to build a family that actually deserves you. Wishing you nothing but peace and joy with your little one. Now to the next story, story 2. I suffocated by the way, my girlfriend turns everyday life into a fairy tale. How can I tell her the truth without breaking her heart? Throwaway, because my main topic can be connected to my girlfriend's blog. I have been with my girlfriend for about 5 months, we've been casual friends since college, but only began dating after she graduated. We get along really well. When I say princess syndrome, I don't mean that she is spoiled or entitled, because she isn't. Her clothes seem to take over her life. She dresses like a sort of fairy tale princess on a near daily basis, excluding at work. Long, frilly skirts, lacy blouses, things like that. It works for her because she is very pretty and can pull it off. At first I found it to be very endearing, but then I became aware of how much time she spends on her outfits. She runs a blog that has a sizable amount of followers, and she is constantly posting outfit pictures, links to clothing items, and whatnot. She spends a few hours a day on her blog, at least. Then she spends time sewing items for new outfits or for her Etsy store. When we go out, we get a lot of stares at what she's wearing. I've also caught people sneaking pictures of her on their cell phones. This attention makes me uncomfortable. I have asked her to tone it down a bit, but she took that to mean not wearing anything in her hair when we're out together. I have told her several times that I love her just the way she is, but she seems to brush it off. I had hoped when she started her new job in the career of her choice that she would become more serious, but her new boss and coworkers encouraged her. I worry that people won't take her seriously, or miss how kind and intelligent she is. How can I talk to her about dressing more appropriately without hurting her feelings? Update 1. Too long, didn't read, girlfriend dresses like a princess? How do I talk to her about it? Relevant comments. Commenter, sounds like you have to get over your insecurities. This is her hobby, her interest, and she's getting positive reactions. You shouldn't be trying to change her, especially when it was something that initially drew you to her. Ope. I guess I'm having trouble seeing clothing as a hobby. I play video games as a hobby, But that doesn't cause strangers to take pictures of me when I'm trying to shop at the supermarket. I get your point that it initially drew me to her, because it did. That's fair. I guess I didn't think that it would be such a constant thing in her life, especially after she graduated. Commenter. So, you love her just the way she is, but you're assuming she'll take that to mean she should change how she is? That doesn't make sense. This is how she is. She enjoys dressing up like this. Shit, she posts outfit photos online because she enjoys it so much. Other people encourage her because they do like how she is. If you don't like the attention, ask her sometime to just go out with you while she's wearing a casual outfit, but keep in mind that she already loves what she's normally wearing. Oop, this is my problem. How do I ask her to dress more casually around me without her misinterpreting what I mean again and also not hurting her feelings? I can think of ways to say one half of that, but it doesn't work with the other half. Commenter. If you love her the way she is, why do you want her to change? Just curious. Oop. She doesn't need all the frilly stuff, she'd still look like a princess. And it's one thing for an artsy college student to dress alternatively, but she's a 23-year-old woman now. I feel like her clothing masks how smart she is and makes her appear shallow. Is it for attention? I do think it's an attention thing. She says she doesn't care about what people think about her, but she spends so much time on her blog, replying to comments and such, I kind of doubt it. She also has told me that she loves being approached by little girls while she's dressed up, which definitely makes me think it's about attention. She doesn't dress inappropriately by those standards, she is well groomed and doesn't show much skin. But is it appropriate to wear lacy dresses and flower crowns to the supermarket? Again, it attracts unnecessary attention. Update 2. I didn't plan on updating, but things changed. I realized from my last post that I needed to be more supportive, but also communicate on how she could dress down on certain occasions so we could both be comfortable. Well, I never got a chance to talk to her about it. Last week she called and wanted to stop by my apartment after work. When she got there I offered to make dinner, but she said she couldn't stay and we had to talk. I jokingly asked if she was breaking up with me, and she looked really guilty. You can see where this is going. We talked about how we were in different places in life and had different goals for the future. Well, she talked, but I agreed. It was a pretty amicable breakup, even though I felt blindsided. We agreed to stay friends. I've never been dumped before, and it's fucking awful. I'm having trouble with the whole social media thing post-breakup. I want a way to keep in touch with her, but as soon as her relationship status changed, all these alternative-looking guys have been liking her posts and commenting on her pictures. I don't think she's seeing these guys, but it still hurts. My friend wants to set me up on a date, but I don't know if it's a good idea. Relevant comments. Commenter. Fickle is the head that wears the flowered lace crown. It was never going to work out anyway. You had some laughs and some good times, enjoy that and move on. OP. I understood some of her reasoning. Mainly, I want to move out of the city once my lease is up, and I wanted her to move in with me. I was worried about the long distance. She didn't want to leave the city, though. She said something about me being controlling too, but I don't think that's the case at all. Block her. We agreed to stay friends, so I don't want to block her. Update 3. 9 years, 8 months later, I was going through an old email and found this account again. I was surprised I could still log in, and even more by the amount of people who had reached out to me. It's a bit embarrassing to relive this breakup from almost 10 years ago. In retrospect, it wasn't meant to be, and I think I was reeling more from getting dumped than the loss of the relationship. I am 33 now and married to a wonderful woman, 31 female, for 4 years. I learned my lesson about supporting my significant other's hobbies. My wife loves running and baking. We have a daughter who is turning 3 this year. I want her to be free to express herself how she likes, as long as it is safe, of course. I would do anything for them. I am still friends with my ex-boyfriend on social media. We don't talk but we'll like each other's posts. She is married to another woman now who also dresses differently. It's not as frilly as she used to dress, but still unusual. Her pictures look like something out of Anne of Green Gables. She seems very happy on their farm together. Too long, didn't read, was dumb in my early 20s. Got over an old breakup and now I am married and happily supporting my wife's hobbies. Relevant comment. Commenter. Can we expect an update in 10 years when your daughter has become a teenager and developed princess syndrome? Also congratulations on your life. Oop. Well, she does love pink and purple. Now to the next story, story 3. I was harassed by my coworkers for suddenly losing weight after undergoing emergency surgery to remove an 18-pound tumor. I just came back to work after a month-long emergency medical leave. The TLDR is that after a decade of medical gaslighting, A new doctor ordered an emergency MRI during a routine visit and discovered a mass in my abdomen. I was rushed into surgery within 24 hours. I ended up having an 18-pound benign tumor pressing on my vital organs, and I was about a week away from multiple organ failure. I'm lucky to be alive, and time will tell if I have any lasting organ damage, but right now everything is fine. Mentally I'm struggling with a few things, but the only outwardly noticeable impact is that I've gone from a size 20 to a size 8. Nobody on my medical team anticipated a change this drastic, but I'm healthy and lucky. I was expecting to get a lot of questions from my coworkers because curiosity exists. I had a basic emergency surgery, but I'm fine now. Answer that almost everyone accepted but one coworker who I hardly speak to, Aubrey. On my first day back to work, Aubrey came up to me and said, "I wish you had come to me to lose weight instead of resorting to such drastic measures. You're going to gain it all back. I'll be waiting." I was aware of Aubrey's reputation, but since we never worked together I didn't think it would be an issue. She's one of those people who thinks they're a fitness expert and calls herself a health coach, nothing to do with the company we work for. She has a reputation for giving out unsolicited and incorrect health advice, and is always commenting on people's food choices. I was speechless when she asked why I opted to get butchered instead of putting in the hard work to lose the weight. There's nothing wrong with someone choosing surgical weight loss options, but that's not what happened to me, and I really resented her aggressive attitude spreading rumors. During my second week back, she came by my office at the end of the day in athletic gear, offering to go with me if I was too afraid to go to the gym alone. At the time I wasn't even cleared to lift my kid, do laundry, or climb a flight of stairs, let alone go to the gym with this crackpot. I don't remember what I said to her, but she left saying I'd gain the weight back because I'm lazy. The next day Aubrey ranted angrily about me in a meeting I wasn't in, missed it for a follow-up, ironically. I don't know everything that was said, but the gist was that if I can't dedicate myself to weight loss, I obviously can't see my work obligations through. HR called for a red flag mediation. At our company, mediation can go against your bonus opportunities for the year. I have no idea why I'm in mediation when she's the one being an asshat. At the mediation, Aubrey stated that she was triggered by my new body, and I should have thought of other people's feelings and warned her before my surgery. I hardly had time to warn my husband and get my kid out of daycare. I don't owe Aubrey anything. I have empathy that she's obviously struggling, but that does not excuse her behavior. HR said that while they can't ask me to explain my medical history, it might clear the air if I told her what kind of surgery I had and why. I said I wasn't obligated to share my medical information with anyone, and that Aubrey having bad coping skills doesn't entitle her to a coworker's personal health information. Their response was kind of, "Well, then we can't stop her from bullying you." After Thanksgiving, my doctor helped me put in ADA accommodation paperwork so I could work from home. I was having some mild complications from surgery, but also to avoid Aubrey. This company hates remote work, so they're really not happy. Aubrey still emails me workout videos and diet plans, and when I forward them to HR, their response is, "Noted. Do you know when you're coming back to the office?" I've been thinking about escalating this to corporate with an employment lawyer. Is that overkill? I'm still in a sensitive place after my surgery, and I have no energy for this, especially since Aubrey is fixated on weight loss, which was the primary way doctors gassed me for years. I've been with this company for 5 years, and I'm just exhausted and disappointed in how they're handling this, and I want it over yesterday. Update 1, all I have to say for this update is hold on to your banana pants. I saw a lot of comments asking where management was in all this, so I'll address that first. My boss, George, was getting ready to retire while this was going on. George is roughly my grandfather's age, so this entire situation bewildered both him and his replacement, who he was training at the time. Both of them met with Aubrey's boss, because believe me, I was documenting everything she did from the jump, and they all assured me that Aubrey would be dealt with. None of them recommended the red flag mediation. That was HR's idea. I was given details of the meeting where Aubrey ranted about me, and it was horrible, but apparently Aubrey was asked to leave by her own boss while several other employees told her to stop. So managerially and in the office in general, people were trying to rein her in from many different angles. HR is where the ball dropped, and dropped hard. This company just has a poor HR structure and bad entry to mid-level HR. When Aubrey's boss referred her to HR regarding her negative behavior, HR took it upon themselves to consider it a mediation situation, which, remember, at our company can go against your bonus for the year. Despite communication from George, his replacement, and Aubrey's boss saying I wasn't in the wrong. When George found out about this, he spoke to the HR generalist manager, who said that my absence probably caused a lot of strain and extra work for Aubrey, when Aubrey's not even credentialed to do what I do. Management made a point to tell me how baffled and upset they were with HR's handling of the situation every time something came up. My company mentor was also a huge support during this time until she decided to take another job elsewhere. When my doctor extended my ADA work from home accommodation a second time, HR responded by telling me my attendance was a concern. I emailed their boss's boss, the HR director, and asked for clarification. He said I hadn't come into the office, so of course my attendance was a problem. I reiterated I had medical documentation stating that if WFH wasn't available, then they could refer to the FMLA documentation my medical team also sent. He replied that medical documentation, including both FMLA and ADA reasonable accommodations, doesn't hold much weight with the company. That's when I got a lawyer. Aubrey as a problem kind of drifted to the background when HR started their medical documentation doesn't matter campaign. On my lawyer's recommendation, I contacted the HR executive team, which is where this whole cursed situation came to light. And I did check with my lawyer about emailing this update, and they laughed and said I couldn't leave people hanging after all that. I called the chief HR officer, which for my company is going over like 5 people's heads, but I did it with George's and my new boss's blessings, who is the head of HR, and asked why my attendance was an issue when I had reasonable ADA documentation. She had no idea what I was talking about, so I filled her in on all of it, including the mediation meeting and Aubrey's harassment and the HR director, her direct report, saying medical documentation didn't hold any weight with the company. She was speechless and asked to meet with me and my lawyer as soon as possible. My lawyer hardly had to do anything during the meeting because the CHRO was horrified at everything I told her. I've never actually seen steam come out of someone's ears, but if it was physically possible it would have happened here. My lawyer didn't need to say a word but just nodded and smiled when the CHRO offered an extended paid medical leave so I could handle my recovery, and said Aubrey constantly sending me fitness plans would be dealt with swiftly. I didn't hear anything out of Aubrey for a long time, but I did hear through some gossip channels that the HR staff involved in the red flag meeting threatening to write me up were let go. Aubrey wasn't fired because they believed she was misled by HR, so I understand that part even if I don't agree with it, but she was on a tight PIP for a while. Then she showed up at my house. Now we move from banana pants to full-on banana ensembles. I'm still on leave, and out of the blue, Aubrey showed up at my door on a weekend with 2 other women in tow, and the commenters guessed it. She's in very deep with an MLM, or maybe a cult, I can't be sure at this point. Aubrey came over to demonstrate some workout techniques and give me some diet supplement samples and discuss a career opportunity, because she was worried about my physical and professional health. She didn't make it past my mother-in-law, who has been a godsend right now. My mother-in-law made it clear where Aubrey could stick her demonstration, and they left in a hurry. I notified my lawyer and the CHRO, and suffice it to say, Aubrey is now a full-time wellness coach. I'm happy I went with my gut and got a lawyer, because the company has changed so drastically over the last year, with the toxic HR department encouraging behavior like Aubrey's and spreading false information about medical leave and time off. The company is almost unrecognizable. Also, with my boss and mentor both gone, I don't know if I'm going to go back once I'm medically cleared. The company is also undergoing a restructuring right now, and my department may end up distributed between other parts of the company or even other parts of the state. I have been looking at jobs and doing some resume drafting for a full-time remote position since it feels like it might be a better fit. But many thanks to the comment section and all the support. Update 2, I got an offer from a local company that's going fully remote with administration and management meeting up once a month. The salary was right, it's 90% remote, it's a good fit, so I'm happy with it. My role is HR adjacent as head of payroll. I reported to the COO and was hired by the CEO and COO. I walked into our first admin meeting, and who was sitting across from me but the HR director, who told me medical documentation doesn't matter and orchestrated my red flag meeting. Let's call him Bob. Bob is the interim HR director for this company. Bob looked very uncomfortable when he saw me. We went through some employee files, including several who are on maternity leave and 2 who were injured on a job site. Bob got quieter as we began reviewing medical documentation and approving paid leave. I smiled and looked him in the eye every time I asked, "And does Jill have her medical documentation?" "Great. Medical documentation holds a lot of weight. That's important stuff to have." He looked like he wanted to melt into his seat. At one point he tried to argue against someone using their PTO to provide end-of-life care for a parent when they had ample PTO. I smiled and said, "You're right, our employee support fund should cover half this time. It's a shame for them to have to lose all their PTO when they're obviously going to need it to heal and grieve over the next few months. Why don't you get me the paperwork for the support fund this afternoon? That's so generous." Everyone was happy and in agreement. He looked like he swallowed a lemon, but everyone was like, "OMG Bob, how thoughtful." He had to eat it so bad and got me the documentation an hour later. Bob can suck it. Bob is also only a contractor, so he'll be moving on soon anyway. Medically, I'm doing better, and very happy to move on from where I was. Aubrey's been full on radio silence, which is perfect for me. Thanks AAM team and commenters. Now, on to the next story, Story 4. My wife left for a month with the hot new neighbor. I filed for divorce, she tried to fix it, but I'm not a backup. I guess I'm writing this to get it out of my system. My name is Mike, I'm 31, and until lately, I felt I had my life under control. I've always been a simple guy, no big dreams, no crazy drama. I had a regular career as a software developer, a decent house in a quiet neighborhood, and, until recently, I believed I had a strong marriage with a woman I truly loved. Laura and I met almost 8 years ago. Looking back, it seems like a lifetime ago. I was 23, fresh out of college, working my first job, and frankly, naive about life. She was 22, working as an assistant at a marketing agency while trying to figure out her own career path. For the record, she never did and eventually became a stay-at-home wife. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue, one of those casual backyard gatherings when everyone is using cheap paper plates and someone is always burning the burgers. She approached me and made a snarky jest about how I appeared to be planning my escape. I can't recall my response, but she laughed, and we ended up talking for the rest of the evening. From then, everything went quickly. We started dating, and it felt like she gave some excitement to my otherwise mundane and routine life. Laura was adventurous and spontaneous, always planning last-minute road trips or bringing me to a new restaurant she had heard about. Meanwhile, I remained the grounded one. I'd be the one to figure out the budget, check the weather, and double-check the gas tank before we hit the road. It seems to work. We balance each other out. She brought excitement into my life, and I offered her the steadiness she stated she lacked in previous relationships. After 3 years of dating, we decided to get married. The wedding was intimate, with only relatives and close friends. We didn't come from wealthy households, so there was no grand ballroom or extravagant catering, but that didn't matter. After the wedding, we began to establish a life together. We purchased a little 2-bedroom house in a quiet suburb, not the fanciest location, but it had potential. For the most part, things seemed stable. When I got home from work, Laura was generally in the kitchen or on the couch, browsing through her phone. She would tell me stories from her day. She worked in marketing at the time, so there was always some drama with clients or coworkers, and I listened. This was our dynamic. She was the storyteller, and I was the listener. We did not have children, but it was a joint decision. Laura wasn't in a rush, and neither was I. We both preferred to wait until we were more financially stable and prepared for the next major step. We seemed to agree on the majority of issues. Looking back, I wonder if I became too comfortable. It's easy to get into a pattern, especially when life feels stable. I would get up, go to work, return home, and repeat. Of course, we had date nights, which usually consisted of supper at one of our favorite restaurants or a movie. But I believe I stopped noticing the small details, like how Laura seemed to thrive on attention. It wasn't too horrible, at least not at first. She's the type of person that can brighten a room, and people instinctively draw towards her. I guess I began to take her vitality and warmth for granted, expecting they were a continuous part of our lives together. At the moment, I wasn't concerned. I assumed we were solid. Sure, we had disagreements now and then, what marriage doesn't? Most of the time, it was about little matters, such as me forgetting to take out the garbage or her leaving her shoes scattered throughout the home. Nothing significant. But there's this issue about relationships. They can appear fine on the outside while cracks occur quietly underneath. If you don't pay attention, those cracks might expand and cause the entire foundation to crumble. I didn't see it coming, at least not then. I thought we were constructing something robust and long-lasting. But sometimes life has a way of proving you incorrect. Jake, a new character, entered our lives. Jake moved in next door when his former neighbors, an elderly couple, downsized and relocated to Florida. He was roughly 28 years old at the time, making him younger than the majority of the residents in the neighborhood. He was a personal trainer, fit, confident, and admittedly a little too attractive for his own good. He had the type of body that made people look twice, as if he had just stepped out of an action film. Jake was easy to notice from the moment he moved in. Not just because of his appearance, but because he was always outside doing something, washing his car, mowing the lawn, erecting a pull-up bar in his yard. There was always a reason for him to go shirtless. He quickly became the buzz of the neighborhood. Laura spotted him right away. How could she not? We first met Jake when he came over to introduce himself while we were in the yard one Saturday morning. He was pleasant, the type of person who could charm anyone. Laura started up a discussion with him almost immediately, asking where he was from, what he did for a living, and how he liked the neighborhood. I recall standing there, smiling and nodding, barely able to say anything while the two of them chatted like old friends. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Laura was outgoing, she spoke to everyone. She'd be just as chatty with the mailman or the guy at the hardware store. It never seemed to me that there was anything unusual about her interest in Jake. But, looking back, I can see the subtle alterations that occurred after that. It started with casual talks. Laura always found a cause to join Jake outside. At first, it was small tasks like getting the mail, watering the plants, and putting out the trash. However, these brief jobs invariably led to 10 or 15-minute conversations with Jake. I once arrived home from work and discovered them conversing in the driveway. Laura was holding a basket of laundry that she had been carrying to the garage, and Jake was lounging casually against his car, laughing at something she said. When I stepped up, they both turned to me, and Laura pretended it was no big deal. Jake was just telling me about his new gym equipment, she explained casually. It did not stop there. A few weeks later, Laura decided to bake cookies, which she hadn't done in months. I didn't think much of it until I noticed her heading across the yard, a dish of cookies in hand. Just being neighborly, she remarked when I asked her about it. I shrugged it off. Laura's behavior in this regard was not unique. She had previously brought brownies to other neighbors. But then there was the time she purchased a new set of training clothes. Bright, fitted leggings and a matching top, which was not something she would ordinarily wear. When I asked her about it, she said she was thinking about starting to jog again. You know, to get back into shape, she explained. I did not question it. Laura had previously gone through fitness phases in which she would become thrilled about working out for a month or two before losing interest. But this time, her timing was ideal. Jake jogged virtually every morning. I'd see him out there, headphones in, doing laps around the street. Laura determined her new jogging program would begin at the same time Jake was out there. I noticed them speaking on the sidewalk one morning as I was going for work. Laura was stretching, and Jake was showing her a way to avoid shin splints. I didn't say anything, just a short wave and drove away. But something in the scene stuck with me. Around this time, I saw Laura's phone habits change as well. She'd always been on her phone, reading around social media and contacting her buddies. But now she appeared wary. When I stepped into the room, she would swiftly lock her screen or flip her phone over, as if she didn't want me to see anything. One night, I observed her scrolling through Instagram, and when I looked over, I saw Jake's name at the top. She hastily swiped past it, but I saw enough to know she was looking at his profile. When I asked her about it, she brushed it aside. I was just checking out his fitness posts, she told me. He has some good workout advice. I wanted to believe her, so I let it go. But the small things kept stacking up. Another day, I was working in the garage and heard laughter coming from the backyard. I stepped outside to see Laura and Jake standing near the fence, laughing about something. Laura was holding an iced tea, and Jake was waving animatedly while telling a story. Laura waved at me as if nothing unusual had occurred. Jake was just telling me about this funny thing that happened at his gym, she explained later when I questioned about it. It was beginning to feel uncomfortable. I don't want to sound paranoid, but you can know when something is wrong. Laura's conversation about Jake had a new energy to it. She'd casually mention things he'd said or done, such as Jake's thinking about getting a dog, or Jake recommended this great protein shake. It wasn't what she was saying, but how she said it. Then there were the glances. You know what I mean. When we went outside and Jake was nearby, I noticed Laura take small glances in his direction. It was subtle, but once you notice it, you can't ignore it. At this moment I had yet to say anything. Part of me refused to think there was anything to worry about. Laura was someone I trusted. We had been together for years, and I thought we had a good relationship. But another part of me, the one that couldn't ignore the pattern, began to question. I chose to be quiet for now, but I began to pay closer attention. If something was happening, I had to witness it for myself. It was a Saturday morning, and I remember it vividly because it began off so typical. I got up early, as I always do, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, browsing through the news on my phone. Laura was still in bed, which was not surprising. She enjoyed her slow mornings, particularly on weekends. The house was silent, with only the humming of the coffee machine in the background, and for a brief minute, I felt peaceful. Funny how that works. You think everything is fine because you have no idea what's going to happen. Laura entered the kitchen around an hour later. She was in her pajamas, her hair all tangled from sleeping, holding her phone in one hand and massaging her eyes with the other. She sat across from me at the table, and I could tell something was up right away. She exuded nervous energy, drumming her fingers on the table and gazing at her phone as if she were avoiding eye contact. "Are you okay?" I inquired, setting down my phone. She nodded hastily before shaking her head. "Actually, no," she responded with a big sigh. "We need to talk." Anyone who has been in a relationship understands that those 4 words rarely mean anything good. My stomach nodded, but I tried to keep it cool. "All right," I murmured, reclining in my chair. "What's going on?" Laura paused, her gaze flitting around the room as if she was looking for the proper words. Finally, she looked at me and said, "I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to say it. I think I have feelings for Jake." For a moment, I believed I had misheard her. "What?" I asked, leaning forward as if being closer would make the words more clear. She bit her lip, appearing really uncomfortable. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said hurriedly, as if she wanted to avoid the response. "It just happened. I've been spending time with Jake, and I feel this connection, and now I'm confused." Confused. That word struck me more than anything else. She did not just express her guilt or admit that she had made a mistake. She expressed her confusion, as if she was trying to solve a puzzle. I stared at her, trying to understand what she was saying. My thoughts raced. Did she mention she wanted to leave? Is she asking for a divorce? Was she trying to confess and move on? I couldn't tell, and that made things worse. "So, what does this mean?" I inquired finally. "Are you saying you're done with us?" Laura shook her head rapidly. "No, not necessarily," she replied. I don't know what I want right now. I love you, Mike. I do, but I can't stop thinking about him, and I need to figure out what these feelings mean." I felt as if the floor had been torn out from beneath me. We'd been together for years, had established a life together, and now she said she wasn't sure she wanted to be with me anymore. It was surreal. I took a deep breath and tried to hold my voice steady. "So, what are you saying? You want to take a break?" She hesitated and then nodded. "Kind of," she responded. "I need time to figure things out. I was thinking maybe I could take a month to spend some time with Jake and see if there's something real there. If it doesn't work out, then we can focus on ourselves." I blinked, astounded by her audacity. "You're serious?" I asked, without even framing it as a question. Laura nodded, her gaze begging. "I know it sounds crazy, but I don't want to throw away what we have without being sure. I don't want to live with regrets, you know?" Regrets. The phrase lingered in my head like a splinter. She was talking about regrets as if she was the one putting everything on the line, as if my feelings were secondary to her life-changing decisions. I sat there, staring at her, a combination of rage and incredulity boiling beneath the surface. Part of me wanted to yell at her for being so selfish. But another part of me, perhaps the calmer, more calculated side, chose to remain silent and let her dig her own hole. "All right," I murmured, reclining back in my chair. Laura blinked, apparently taken off guard. "Wait, really?" "Sure," I replied, shrugging as if it were no great issue. "If you think that's what you need, go ahead." Her look flickered, as if she didn't know whether I was being real or mocking. "I just think it's the best way to figure out where my heart is," she admitted cautiously. "Sure," I replied. "Do what you need to do." Inside, I was already finished. When she mentioned she wanted to spend a month with another man, my brain flicked a switch. But I didn't want to show my cards yet. If she was willing to abandon our marriage for a dream with a neighbor, I was curious to see how far she would go. Laura let out a relieved sigh, as if she had just been given permission to accomplish something heroic. "Thank you," she replied, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "I know this is a lot to ask, but I really believe it's the right thing for us." I stood up and grabbed my coffee mug, pulling my hand away. "Sure," I repeated, my voice flat. "If that's what you need." She said nothing after that, simply sat there, most likely contemplating the fact that I wasn't arguing or fighting. But within, I was already planning. Laura spent the following few days packing a modest bag. She informed me she'd be staying with Jake, and she made it sound casual, as if it was simply a temporary arrangement. She didn't appear to realize that I wasn't asking inquiries or expressing any resistance. When Laura went, the house felt different. Not empty, but quieter, as if someone had turned down the volume on my life. I stood in the living room after she left, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, and stared at the door. I expected to feel angry or heartbroken, but all I felt was a peculiar peace, as if the weight of pretending everything was fine had finally been lifted. I strolled into the kitchen, poured myself a drink of water, and stood there, trying to figure out what had just happened. My wife, whom I had been with for years and expected to spend my life with, had departed to figure things out with the guy next door. If it hadn't been my life, I would have assumed it was some insane TV drama. The first several days felt odd. I started noticing the little things she'd left behind. Her favorite cup on the kitchen counter, a pair of shoes near the entrance, and a blanket thrown over the back of the couch. I considered relocating them, but ultimately chose to leave them where they were, not because I missed her, but because I didn't want to waste energy. I poured myself into work, taking on extra assignments to fill my schedule. I stayed late at work not because I had to, but because I didn't want to return home to an empty house. When I wasn't working, I went to the gym frequently. I had never been a regular gym goer before, but there was something fulfilling about pushing myself physically, as if I could sweat out all of my stress. Friends began to realize that something was amiss. A few of them inquired as to why Laura was not present, and I responded vaguely. "She's staying with a friend for a while," I explained, attempting to sound casual. I wasn't ready to dive into the real tale yet. My father was the only one I spoke the truth to. I contacted him a few days after Laura left, and the first thing he asked was, "What's wrong?" He's always been able to read me, even over the phone. When I informed him what had happened, there was a prolonged delay on the other end of the call. Then he added, "Well, son, I hate to say it, but it sounds like you're better off without her." At first, I wasn't sure what to reply. I anticipated him to be more furious or ask more questions. But then he said something that remained with me. "If she doesn't know your worth, why should you wait around for her to figure it out?" He was correct. I'd spent so much time trying to understand Laura's decision and find out where I went wrong that I hadn't considered what I deserved. I wasn't just a backup plan in case her affair with Jake didn't work out. That night, I sat in the darkened living room, staring at the wedding photo on the mantel. We seemed so pleased in that image, so certain in our future. But now it simply felt like a reminder of all that had gone wrong. By the end of the week, I had made my decision. I was not going to sit around and wait for Laura to make her big decision. I was planning to make my own. The next day, I called a divorce attorney. Sitting in that lawyer's office felt weird. I detailed the scenario, attempting to maintain a steady voice, even though a part of me still couldn't believe it was true. The lawyer listened intently, nodding as I spoke, and when I finished, he replied, "You are well within your rights to file for divorce. This type of situation falls under irreconcilable differences." Hearing those words made things click in my head. Irreconcilable differences. This is what we would become. Laura and I weren't on the same page anymore, and perhaps we never had been. The lawyer guided me through the process, outlining what I needed to do and what I could expect. By the time I left his office, I had a strange sense of satisfaction, as if I had finally taken charge of my life. Back home, I began taking little efforts to prepare for the inevitable. I transferred some money to a second account in case things became ugly later. I walked through the house and began mentally partitioning what was mine and what was hers. I didn't touch her belongings yet. I figured I'd wait until things were official, but in my head, I was already planning how the house would look without her. The days stretched into weeks, and I grew accustomed to the stillness. It wasn't as horrible as I expected. In fact, it felt really tranquil. I didn't have to deal with Laura's continual chatter or the minor disagreements over trivial matters like whose turn it was to do the dishes. Meanwhile, I started hearing stuff through the grapevine. A neighbor reported seeing Laura and Jake at the park, looking cozy. Another person claimed to have seen them at a cafe downtown. I nodded and smiled, as if nothing bothered me, but inside I was filled with rage and pity. Anger because she had thrown away everything we owned for a fling with a boy who was unlikely to stick around. Pity, because I knew it wouldn't go well for her. Jake did not strike me as the sort to settle down, and Laura was about to find out the hard way. By the third week, I had stopped checking my phone for Laura's texts. I assumed if she wanted to communicate, she'd reach out, but I wasn't holding my breath. I was finished waiting for her. One night, while cleaning out the garage, I came upon a box of old photos from when Laura and I first met. For a brief period, I felt a stab of sadness as I remembered how happy we had been back then. But then I remembered all the subtle red signs I'd disregarded over the years, all the times I'd prioritized her demands over mine without even recognizing it. I closed and moved the box away. I didn't need those memories. Laura decided to make her spectacular reappearance almost exactly a month ago today. I had not heard anything from her during her brief trial with Jake. The few texts she sent were vague at best. "Hope you're doing okay," or "We'll chat when I get back." She didn't even try to keep me updated or pretend she was torn about her decision. It was as if she had already dismissed me as Plan B. By this point, I had ceased caring. I wasn't waiting by the door for her to come to her senses. I wasn't pacing the house, wondering what she and Jake were doing. I had filed for divorce, and my lawyer had already begun drafting the paperwork. As far as I was concerned, the marriage was ended. But I didn't tell her that just yet. When she went through the door, nothing seemed to have changed, at least for her. She had her bag draped over her shoulder, her hair nicely done, and a confident expression on her face, as if she'd just returned from a trip and was expecting me to roll out the red carpet. "Hey," she said, placing her luggage by the door. "I'm back." I was sitting on the couch, scrolling between channels and scarcely looking up. "Welcome back," I murmured, my tone remaining neutral. She paused, as if she was anticipating more of a response. When I didn't jump up or inquire how it went, she walked over and perched on the couch's arm. "We should talk," she stated quietly and carefully. I turned to face her and muted the TV. "All right," I replied, crossing my arms. "Talk." Laura smiled, the kind of smile she used when she was trying to make things better. "I've done a lot of thinking," she told me. "And I've realized some things. About myself. About us, about what I want." I simply nodded, waiting for her to continue. She took a big breath, as if she were ready to give an impassioned statement. "I care about you, Mike. I really do. And I think we can work through this. I think we can rebuild what we have." Rebuild. She stated it as if it were as simple as repairing a leaking faucet. I didn't say anything, simply looked at her, allowing her to fill the silence. She was perplexed by my silence, but she persisted. "Jake's a great guy," she remarked, and I had to bite my tongue to stop giggling at how casually she mentioned him. But I realized he's not what I need. He's fun, sure, but he's immature. He doesn't have the stability that you have, and I think I was just caught up in the excitement of it all. There it was. Her big revelation. She tried out the shiny new toy and decided she liked the old one more. "Uh-huh," I replied, my voice cool. Laura blinked, as if she expected a more intense reply. "I know I've hurt you," she murmured, reaching out and touching my arm. "But I really believe we can get past this. We've been through so much together, Mike. We have history. That's not something you just throw away." I let her continue. I let her unload all of her perfectly practiced phrases about love, forgiveness, and beginning over. When she finished talking, I rose up and walked over to the kitchen counter. I unlocked a drawer, pulled out the divorce papers my lawyer had sent over, and placed them on the table in front of her. "What's this?" she inquired, her smile fading. "Divorce papers," I explained simply. Her face turned pallid. "You're kidding," she exclaimed, releasing a frightened laugh. "Nope," I replied, leaning against the counter, arms folded. "I'm not kidding." For a time, she stared at the papers, as if she couldn't believe what she saw. Then she glanced up at me with big eyes. "You're divorcing me?" "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not interested in being your second choice, Laura." Her face went from shock to angry in an instant. "Second choice?" she demanded. "That's not what this is." I was confused, Mike. I needed time to figure things out. "And in the process, you decided to test the waters with another man," I added calmly. "You left. You walked out on our marriage. And now you're back because it didn't work out with him. Do you honestly think I'm just going to take you back like nothing happened?" Laura opened her mouth to argue before closing it again, her face growing red. "It's not like that," she responded, her voice quivering. "I was trying to do the right thing. I didn't want to stay and resent you. I thought—" She trailed off, her gaze darting across the room. "You thought you could have it both ways," I said for her. She stood up and crossed her arms. "You're making a mistake, Mike. We can fix this. I know we can." "No," I replied firmly. "We can't. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." She appeared to be about to cry, but I didn't let that affect me. I had already made up my mind. The remainder of the conversation was a haze. She tried to argue and guilt me into altering my mind. She discussed our history, our home, and even the possibility of starting a family someday. But nothing worked. Finally, she stormed out of the house. I stood there for a time, staring at the empty area where she had been, without feeling anything. No sadness, no regret, no second thoughts, only relief. Later that night, I called my lawyer to inform him that Laura had seen the paperwork. He said, "How'd she take it?" "Not great," I remarked, smirking. "Do you want to give her time to process, or should we move forward?" "Move forward," I instructed without hesitation. It wasn't easy standing up to Laura, but it was ultimately the correct thing to do. She viewed me as a backup plan in case her fling didn't work out. And if she believed I'd take it, she obviously didn't know me as well as she imagined. I knew she would not give up easily. Laura was not the sort to simply walk away from a confrontation, especially one in which she thought she was losing. I'd hardly sat down when my phone buzzed with a text from her. "This isn't over." I gazed at the message for a second before locking my phone and throwing it on the couch. She was correct, it was not over. Not yet. But it would happen soon enough. The following several days were eventful, to say the least. Laura arrived unannounced the next evening, beating on the door as if she were attempting to break it down. "Mike, open the door," she exclaimed. I opened it, keeping a bland attitude. "What do you want, Laura?" She rushed by me and stormed into the living room, as if she still lived there. "We need to talk," she stated, pacing back and forth. "You can't just file for divorce without giving me a chance to fix things." I leaned against the doorframe and crossed my arms. "You had your chance," I replied quietly. "You made your decision when you left." "That's not fair," she responded, her voice rising. "I didn't leave to end our marriage, I left to figure things out, to make sure I wasn't making a mistake by staying." I could not help but laugh dryly. "And in doing that, you proved you didn't value what we had. You don't test a marriage by running off to someone else, Laura. That's not how it works." She paused pacing and turned to face me, her eyes blazing with frustration. "I was confused," she remarked, her voice shaking. "I didn't know what I wanted, but I know now. I want us, Mike. I want to fix this." "Too late," I replied, my tone strong. "You don't get to come back now just because things didn't work out with Jake." Her face contorted in rage, and she aimed a finger at me. "You're being petty," she said. "You're throwing away everything we built over one mistake." I shook my head, maintaining my composure. "It wasn't just one mistake, Laura. It was a series of choices. You chose to flirt with Jake. You chose to prioritize your feelings for him over our marriage. And then you chose to leave. Those weren't accidents, they were decisions." She opened her lips to argue, but then stopped, her shoulders sagging. For the first time, she appeared defeated. "What am I supposed to do now?" she inquired quietly. I sighed, feeling pity for her, despite everything she had done. "That's not my problem anymore," I explained. "You made your choices. Now you have to live with them." She waited for another minute, looking as if she wanted to say anything else, but then she walked out without saying anything. Following that, the divorce proceedings went fast. Laura attempted to drag things out at first, perhaps expecting I would change my mind. She even tried to play the victim in front of our mutual acquaintances, accusing me of being cold and cruel. My father, on the other hand, was completely on my side. When I told him about the scenario, he let out a low whistle. "She's got some nerve," he commented. "But I'm proud of you, son. Standing your ground isn't easy, but it's the right thing to do." Laura's stalling tactics proved ineffective. My lawyer was sharp, and the proof of her leaving for Jake made things quite clear. She attempted to plead for spousal support, stating she had given up her profession for the marriage, but the judge did not buy it. Finally, we reached a reasonable deal. She received a modest sum of money and some of the furniture she'd chosen, but I kept the house and the most of my savings. It was not ideal, but it was better than I had anticipated. The final hearing was bittersweet. Sitting in that courtroom, signing the documents that would officially end our marriage, felt strange. I glanced across at Laura a few times. She appeared exhausted, as if she hadn't slept in days. Her lawyer handed her a pen, and for a brief minute, I assumed she was not going to sign. But eventually, she scribbled her name at the bottom of the sheet, completing the transaction. Following the hearing, she approached me in the hallway. "Mike," she spoke softly, just above a whisper. "I'm sorry for everything." I stared at her, hoping to recognize the person I'd fallen in love with all those years ago, but all I saw was someone I used to know. "I know you are," I replied. "But sorry doesn't fix this." Her eyes welled up with tears, and she reached out to hug me, but I pulled aside. "Take care of yourself, Laura," I whispered, starting to walk away. I'd occasionally hear tidbits about Laura through the grapevine. Jake obviously moved on to someone else shortly after she returned to me. According to one common friend, she was currently living with a relative and figuring out her next moves. I didn't feel satisfied hearing about her problems, but I also didn't feel sorry for her. She had made her decisions, and now she was dealing with the consequences. One day, I ran into her at the supermarket. We locked eyes briefly, and I could see remorse written all over her face. She gave me a little hesitant wave, but I simply nodded and moved past. There was nothing more to say. Looking back, I don't regret how I handled situations. Laura believed she could have it both ways. She could go, pursue her feelings for someone else, then return to me if it didn't work out. But life does not operate that way. I've learned a lot about myself along this process. I realize now that I deserve someone who cherishes me and does not consider me as a last resort. And if that individual is out there, fantastic. If not, that's okay too. For the time being, my primary goal is to reconstruct my life on my own terms. Laura's trial run with Jake may have been her way of gaining clarity, but it was a wake-up call I didn't realize I needed. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. Now to the next story 5. My fiancé left me for the neighbor's daughter, but his father secretly rewrote his will, leaving everything to me. My fiancé abandoned me for the neighbor's daughter, but his father secretly modified his will due to his disgust with his son's behavior. I, a 28-year-old female, can't believe I'm writing this. I've been gazing at my laptop for hours, trying to make sense of what happened. I met James, 30 male, at a tech company 5 years ago. I had recently moved to Boston for a job after finishing college in Seattle. James worked in product development, while I was in marketing. He was charming, successful, and appeared great. We started as pals. James would converse at my work during coffee breaks, and we finally had lunch together. 6 months later, he asked me out on a date. I was apprehensive about office connections, but he made them seem natural. We dated for 3 years before becoming engaged. I became close to his parents, Tom, 58 male, and Sarah, 55 female, who treated me like a daughter. They had no other children, and Sarah was overjoyed to gain a daughter. Their beautiful historic home, passed down through generations, became the setting for our Sunday family dinners. During one of these dinners, James proposed with his grandmother's ring, and Sarah presented me with a family necklace as a formal welcome. The wedding planning process was flawless. James' parents insisted on donating, despite the fact that my family was already covered. Sarah assisted with everything, from dress fittings to decor, and bonded with my mother. Everything felt wonderful in the week leading up to the wedding. James appeared excited, so we arranged a honeymoon to Europe, which his parents generously offered us. At the rehearsal dinner, James delivered a moving speech about our future. Sarah hugged me, proud of having me as her daughter-in-law. Tom appeared emotional, despite his reserved demeanor. On the wedding day, as I was getting ready, James' best man arrived, visibly apprehensive. He handed me a message from James, stating he couldn't do it and wanted time to think things through. I called James, but his phone was turned off. His best man admitted that James had left early in the morning. The aftermath was chaotic. My parents rushed to cancel everything. James' parents were stunned. Sarah attempted to reach him, but Tom looked glum, almost unsurprised. I sat in my wedding dress for hours, devastated. The guests were sent home, and all we had prepared went to waste. My parents wasted thousands in non-refundable deposits. 2 days later, when I was still in bed, a friend sent me an Instagram screenshot. James had shared a photo with Kelly, 26 female, a neighbor's daughter who resided 3 homes down from his parents. They were obviously together, looking happy and comfortable in what appeared to be her residence. Kelly had always been there at family functions because she lived so near to James's parents. The caption said, "Sometimes the right path isn't the easy one." I never noticed that she frequently joined us for Sunday dinners with her parents. She was constantly nice, inquiring about the wedding plans and even offering to assist with the arrangements. Now I understand why she was so interested in the details. I found out from common friends that James and Kelly had been seeing each other behind my back for months. They apparently became close after she joined the local tennis club where James played. They had been practicing early in the morning before going to work. What hurts more than James' betrayal is his parents' reaction. Instead of being furious with him, they embraced his new relationship. Sarah called me a week after the wedding catastrophe, not to apologize or check on me, but to explain why I shouldn't be upset with James' decision. She claimed Kelly was a better match for James because her family had connections in the computer world. Kelly's father had a thriving software company, and James was certain to receive a sizable share of the family business one day. Sarah had the nerve to imply that, while they liked me, they needed to consider James's future, and Kelly could provide him with better prospects. She noted that sometimes parents must support their children's decisions, even if they appear harsh to others. The mother who had cried with excitement when I announced my engagement and helped me arrange every detail of my wedding was suddenly acting as if I were simply a stepping stone on her son's journey to prosperity. Then came an unexpected twist. James' father's attorney phoned me 2 weeks after the wedding. Tom updated his will 2 months before the wedding. The lawyer indicated that Tom saw through James's actions and was repulsed by them. He gave me documents demonstrating that Tom had left everything, the family business, properties, and investments, to me rather than James. This was done in secret, without anyone's knowledge, including Sarah. When I questioned the lawyer why Tom would do this, he explained that he had been seeing James' behavior shift over the previous year. He hired a private investigator to investigate some of his suspicions. The lawyer brought me a letter Tom had written to explain everything. Tom had learned James' tendency of exploiting others to his advantage and was ashamed of the guy his son had become. The letter stated that he observed how sincere and hardworking I was and believed I would be a better steward of the family legacy than his own son. I have not notified anyone about the will yet, even my parents. James and his mother still believe he is going to inherit everything. I'm simply trying to digest everything while watching them enjoy his new relationship with Kelly as if nothing happened. Sarah publishes images of them together on Facebook, expressing her joy that her son has discovered his true love. The toughest part is witnessing my almost mother-in-law, who I assume loved me like a daughter, act as if I never existed. Update 1. The last 2 weeks have been an absolute disaster. Just when I thought things couldn't get much worse, I discovered new lies and betrayals that made my head spin. Yesterday, I learned that James' parents mortgaged their historic family house shortly after our engagement. They took out a large debt since James promised to help them with payments after he received his inheritance. Sarah was so sure about James's future with Kelly's family that they not only mortgaged the house, but also took out additional loans to refurbish it and purchase a vacation home on Cape Cod. Sarah had been gloating to my mother about their restoration plans during the wedding preparations, which led me to this discovery. My mother mentioned this to me while we were sorting through wedding gifts that needed to be returned. Curious about how they could afford such expensive upgrades, I inquired. One of Tom's colleagues informed me about the mortgage predicament, stating that he had cautioned Tom against it. But it isn't the most devastating part. Emily, one of my bridesmaids who works at the wedding venue, visited me yesterday. She seemed uneasy and admitted to withholding something from me. She disclosed that James' parents had known about his intention to abandon me at the altar for weeks. They didn't just know. They actively helped him plan the entire affair. Emily overheard Sarah talking about the idea with the venue planner 3 weeks before the wedding. Sarah inquired about their cancellation policy and whether they might receive a partial refund if the wedding was called off at the last minute. The coordinator noticed something weird and told it to Emily, but they assumed it was just an anxious mother-in-law being meticulous. Sarah and James had planned this for more than a month. They continued to encourage me to spend more on deposits that they knew would be lost. Sarah even persuaded me to enhance the floral arrangements 2 days before the wedding, knowing full well that her son would not attend. She assisted me in selecting additional decorations and even suggested that I purchase a more expensive wedding gown, all while being aware of their plans. The more I study, the worse I feel. They sat there at family meals, assisted with wedding preparations, and claimed to be enthused about our future together, all the while preparing to embarrass me in front of everyone I know. I visited with Tom's lawyer again yesterday, and he revealed even more frightening details concerning James. This was not his first experience doing something like this. The lawyer provided me documentation of James's previous engagements to 2 other women. Both engagements ended in identical ways, with James leaving for someone he believed would be more advantageous to his future. The first was Rachel, his college sweetheart. They were engaged during their senior year until James met a tech executive's daughter at a career fair. He ended their engagement by email and began dating the executive's daughter a week later. That romance ended when he found she was not as close to her father as he had imagined. The second person was Amanda, who worked at his first job. They were engaged for 6 months until James learned that her family's business was faltering. He left her for a woman whose father served on the board of a major firm. That romance also failed when the woman's father expressed his disapproval of James. Tom had been gathering this material for several months. He engaged a private investigator, who discovered James' practice of exploiting women for social and financial benefit. This research is what prompted Tom to change his will. The lawyer showed me images, emails, and text messages proving James had been plotting to leave me since he met Kelly at the tennis club. But today provided the biggest surprise. Kelly arrived at my apartment crying. She discovered messages on James' phone while he was showering. The communications revealed that James was already chasing Emily, her wealthy cousin who is destined to inherit her family's multi-million-dollar technology company. Emily evidently visits from California every summer, and James had planned to meet her on her next visit. Kelly was devastated. She showed me all of the texts, including talks between James and Sarah that criticized Kelly and myself. They referred to us as stepping stones along James' route to achievement. Sarah even recommended specific strategies for James to acquire Emily's trust, such as using his friendship with Kelly. The communications also revealed that Sarah had suggested James join the tennis club where Kelly played, knowing they'd meet there. She had planned the entire event, from fostering their friendship to arranging early morning practice sessions where they could meet without my knowledge. Since Kelly left James, Sarah has been phoning me non-stop. She's probably hoping to persuade me to accept James back after his plan with Kelly went through. Every time she called, I let it go to voicemail. Her texts have shifted from nasty to desperate, imploring me to speak with her. She has no idea about the will, nor do I know about their role in destroying my wedding day. The lawyer recommended that I keep my fortune a secret for the time being. There are still some legal steps to go through, and he believes it is best if James and Sarah are unaware of the will until it is finalized. He's scared they'll try to contest it if they find out too soon. Kelly and I talked for hours today. She profusely apologized for her role in everything, claiming she had no knowledge of James's background or plans to pursue her cousin. She believed he had fallen in love with her and abandoned me because of his sentiments. Finding those notes made her realize she was merely a piece in his game. I am still processing all of this information. Every day seems to reveal something new about the folks I thought I knew and trusted. According to the lawyer, we should have all of the inheritance documentation in order within a few weeks. Until then, I'm simply trying to keep my head above water while resisting the impulse to reveal everything I know about James and his mother. Update. This week, everything detonated in the worst conceivable way. James' parents learned about the inheritance predicament during a meeting with their bank. They were attempting to obtain another loan using the family business as collateral for further house upgrades. The bank notified them that they no longer possessed any rights to the company or its assets. Sarah appears to have had a total collapse right in the bank. Sarah arrived at my workplace, screaming. She got past security by claiming to be my mother-in-law and started causing a commotion in the middle of the workplace. She raged at me for manipulating Tom and stealing their family legacy. My coworkers had to summon security to remove her, but not before she informed everyone that James had abandoned me at the altar. I had been keeping it quiet at work, telling everyone that the wedding had been postponed. After Sarah's outburst, James began phoning and messaging non-stop. His messages alternated between begging pardon and accusing me of wrecking his family. He stated he made a tremendous mistake by leaving me and that he still loved me. According to him, Kelly meant nothing, and he only left because he was afraid of commitment. This dramatic change of heart occurred shortly after Kelly moved out, and his efforts to contact her cousin Emily had failed terribly. Kelly informed me that Emily had laughed when James attempted to ask her out. She had already learned everything about him from Kelly and alerted their entire extended family about his actions. James is now unable to access the family business that he was so interested in. Tom eventually ended his quiet this week. He organized a family meeting at his place, inviting Kelly's parents, who had been close family friends for years. Tom revealed everything, including the private investigator's findings, James' pattern with his ex-fiancées, and Sarah's role in allowing his behavior. He explained why he had modified his will, providing everyone the information he had obtained about James and Sarah's scheme. Sarah burst into tears when Tom told her that their home will be foreclosed in a matter of weeks. They had taken out numerous loans, banking on James' fortune to pay them off. They were now drowning in debt, unable to make their payments. Their flawless plan had gone totally wrong. James attempted to explain himself, claiming that he was under pressure from his mother to find someone affluent. Tom pulled out printed copies of James' messages to Sarah, revealing that he had boasted about influencing both Kelly and myself. There were communications discussing how he intended to exploit Kelly's family ties to meet Emily and how he had estimated how much he might profit from each relationship. The most alarming discovery was that Sarah had produced thorough spreadsheets comparing the possible financial benefits of James being with me, Kelly, and Emily. She had kept track of everything, including our family income and possible business contacts. Kelly's father was upset when he discovered this, especially since Sarah was one of his wife's closest friends. James' parents had been pleading with me for forgiveness since the bank began the foreclosure process. Sarah sends lengthy emails describing how she was simply trying to be a good mother and got carried away with wanting the best for her baby. She promised a public apology and even proposed revealing everything to my parents. James took a different strategy. He came up at my place last night with his grandmother's ring, which I had returned following the botched wedding. He urged that we get back together and solve things. He suggested we operate the family business jointly and help his parents keep their home. He appeared to have entirely forgotten that he had humiliated me and plotted everything with his mother. I did not let him in. I spoke with him through the door and warned him to leave before I called the police. He became enraged, accusing me of being cruel and heartless, of ripping his family apart over a single mistake, one that he and his mother had planned months in advance. It had cost my family thousands of dollars in wedding deposits while also humiliating me in front of everyone I knew. Tom called me thereafter to apologize for James' appearance. He stated that he is working with his lawyer to obtain a restraining order against both James and Sarah to protect me. Kelly's father is also assisting, using his contacts to ensure James cannot find another job in the IT business in our area. It's a tiny consolation to know that there are still nice people in this mess. Update 2. After months of legal back and forth, the inheritance has finally been settled. I used a portion of it to launch a profitable branch of the family firm focused on sustainable technology solutions, which Tom had always wanted to pursue but Sarah and James had resisted. Tom has been a great mentor throughout this process, teaching me everything I need to know about the business and connecting me to all of his industry contacts. James attempted to dispute the will in court, saying that I misled his father when he was mentally sick. That backfired dramatically when all of his previous actions were used as proof. The private investigator Tom hired testified about James' pattern with his ex-fiancées, and Rachel and Amanda stepped forward to tell their stories. The judge not only dismissed James' claim, but also ordered him to pay all legal costs. James' parents had to leave their family home last month. They now reside in a small rental flat on the outskirts of the city. Sarah still attempts to reach out on occasion, usually after drinking too much. Her messages alternate between asking pardon and accusing me for wrecking their life. I've blocked her phone number, but she keeps using new email addresses to reach me. James struck rock bottom when Kelly's father exposed his actions to the whole IT world. He had to take an entry-level customer service position at a tiny company outside of town. Last I heard, he was still living with a roommate and working for Uber on weekends to make ends meet. He attempted to apologize to Kelly's family in the hopes of re-establishing those links, but they refused to speak with him. The karma did not end there. Emily, Kelly's cousin, whom James attempted to pursue, ended up dating and just became engaged to Kelly's brother Mark. They now operate the IT firm that James was so interested in, and it is more prosperous than before. Kelly has become a good friend. We meet for coffee on a regular basis and occasionally joke at how we both manage to avoid James' manipulation. Tom has been my staunchest supporter throughout this entire process. He believes that watching me succeed with the company has helped him deal with his disappointment in James. We've grown the business by 40% in just 6 months, and our new sustainable tech segment is attracting the attention of major investors. Tom recently told me that revising his will was the best decision he'd ever made. I've utilized a portion of my fortune to establish a foundation that assists those who have been financially harmed by broken engagements. We reimburse lost wedding deposits and give legal assistance when needed. Rachel and Amanda now work with the foundation, sharing their story to help others recognize the warning signs we all overlooked with James. Following James's unsuccessful challenge to the will, the court issued an order prohibiting him from having any involvement in the family firm or charity indefinitely. He tried to argue that this was unfair, but given the evidence of his previous actions, the judge was unimpressed. My personal life is currently better than it would have been if I had married James. I've started dating again, but I'm taking things cautiously. My parents are proud of how I've handled everything, and watching the company prosper under my leadership has helped them move over their resentment over the wedding tragedy. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if James had been honest from the start. But then I recall what Tom told me: sometimes the worst things that happen to us are actually blessings in disguise. He was correct. Losing James inspired me to discover my own strength, pursue a great career, and create something significant to benefit others. That is worth more than any wedding could have been.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.
Now to the next story 6. After 2 months selling home to travel, my sister and her husband want to live with me rent-free for 10 months. Am I the asshole for refusing them? So, I, 32 male, own a modest 3-bedroom house that I've been paying off for the last 10 years. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine and I'm proud of it. My sister, 29 female, and her husband, 31 male, are the typical free-spirited types. They've always talked about quitting the rat race, living life to the fullest, all that. Well, a few months ago, they finally did it. They sold their house during a booming market, thinking the profit would fund a year-long break to travel. They believed they could stretch the money by traveling cheaply, staying in hostels or Airbnbs, and getting by with occasional odd jobs. At first, they stayed in nicer places and ate out a lot, thinking they had plenty of cushion, but within 2 months, they were out of money. They underestimated how quickly expenses would pile up, especially with 2 young kids, 7 female and 5 male, to feed and care for. Now that their funds are drained, they've decided to stop full-time travel but don't want to settle down yet. Instead, they asked to live with me, rent-free, for the next 10 months while they figure things out. They say they'll still try to take some occasional trips if they find super cheap deals, but for the most part, they want to stay at my house. I told them no. My house isn't big enough, I don't want the disruption, and I certainly don't think it's fair for them to live off me because their plan failed. I offered to help them find an affordable rental or even cover part of their expenses for a couple of months so they could get back on their feet, but that wasn't enough. My sister blew up at me, calling me selfish and accusing me of being jealous of their adventurous lifestyle. To make it worse, my parents are siding with her, saying that family should help the family and that I'm being too rigid. The thing is, my parents live in a small apartment and can't take in my sister's family, which is probably why they're pushing it on me. They say I don't understand the value of experiences, and that I should be more supportive. Some of our mutual friends are also saying I should be more understanding, but I think it's completely unreasonable to expect me to house their whole family for nearly a year just because they didn't plan properly. Am I an asshole? Now to the next story 7. My own family organized an intervention to disown me for the sake of the family. Sadly, they were unaware of the covert business I owned. Hello everyone, before we begin, a small favor? If you love this type of work, please subscribe. It's free, helps the channel, and ensures you never miss out on great videos. Okay, let's get started. Let me set the scene. My name is Alex, and I've always been referred to as the black sheep of my family. My family is all about appearance. We're talking about an entire clan that is completely infatuated with flashy objects. My parents own a network of jewelry stores where wealthy individuals may spend a year's rent on something they'll only wear twice. Jewelry is more than simply a business for them. It is a part of their personality. Apparently, I am the flaw that tarnishes their flawless image. It's not like I'm a slacker who spends his days playing video games in the basement. Far from it. I own a business that designs and customizes high-end bikes. I'm not referring to the kind you acquire in a sports goods store. These are handcrafted, elegant machines with incredible attention to detail, bikes that are more expensive than some cars. My clientele? CEOs, celebrities, and collectors seeking something one of a kind. But here's the thing, I keep a fairly low profile. I do not drive flashy automobiles or wear expensive watches. My workshop isn't in a flashy office park. It's in an old industrial building that I purchased outright. My company is small, only a few individuals I trust, and we produce bikes with a 6-month waitlist. My family? They are not aware of any of this. To them, I'm just the guy who prioritized his hobby over the family business. Growing up, my parents made it apparent that they prioritized achievement, money, and maintaining appearances. My older brother Ethan was groomed to take over the jewelry empire. He has the firstborn golden child idea down to a science. My sister, Vanessa, is their pride and delight since she married into money. And then there's Daniel, the family baby who can't do anything wrong, despite the fact that he lives off the family name. I guess I was doomed from the beginning. I did not want what they wanted. They enjoyed the limelight, the continual desire to network, and the pressure to project the picture of a perfect family. I despised it. When I was younger, I'd sneak away from their silly galas and charity dinners to tinker with everything I could get my hands on. Broken radios, old motorcycles, anything mechanical. That is how I discovered my passion. As I grew older, it became clear that I did not fit in. My parents wanted me to join the family business, but I couldn't think of anything worse. Selling jewelry to people who value money over quality? No, thanks. I wanted to build something with a meaning. After college, which they only paid for because they expected me to come to my senses, I began working on my bike designs. At first, it was just me in my garage, but the demand quickly rose. I invested everything I had in the business, time, energy, and money, and it paid off. My ideas began to gain traction, and I soon had clients eager to pay exorbitant fees for my work. Here's where it gets funny. My family knows I'm self-employed, yet they believe I'm barely getting by. They are unaware of my achievement since I do not brag about it. I drive a regular automobile, dress regularly, and avoid their small networking events like the plague. They see my modest lifestyle as proof that I failed. The truth is that I outperform all of them combined. My business has reached 7 figures. I have collaborations with major brands, a class that has been scheduled for months, and a reputation that is spreading worldwide. But none of that matters to them because, in their opinion, success isn't real unless it's on your wrist or parked in the driveway. The protocol is the same every time I visit them. Ethan brags about his latest strategic partnership, which is really a fancy way of stating he inked a deal set up by his father. Vanessa hints about her glamorous life, which primarily entails being a socialite. Daniel behaves like a frat dude who has never outgrown his college glory days. And me? I receive nice phony smiles and passive-aggressive comments about my potential. "Are you still working on those bikes?" Dad asks with a disappointed tone. "Yeah," I'll reply, keeping things brief because there's no use in explaining myself. Vanessa once asked me directly if I needed help obtaining a real job. I chuckled and told her I was fine, but she gave me a look as if she had just done me a favor by proposing it. The worst aspect is that they never ask about my business. Not really. They think it's just a phase I'll go through, as if I'm a naive adolescent. It's offensive, but also sort of funny. They're so caught up in their own world, so persuaded that their way is the only way, that they don't notice what's in front of them. I kept my success to myself for a reason. I'm not hiding it. I simply don't feel the need to prove anything. My work speaks for itself, and those who matter understand the reality. My clients value what I do, my staff is fantastic, and I've created something that I'm truly proud of. I don't need their affirmation or approval, but the truth is that they aren't content to let me live my life. They've been dropping hints and subtle statements about how my actions affect the family. Not being involved in the jewelry business appears to be a form of betrayal. They act as if I owe them something, as if I'm failing to meet their expectations by not following along. Ethan cornered me at one of Mom's dinner gatherings and began lecturing me on family legacy. He literally said, "You're either with us or against us." I nearly choked on my drink. "Against you? Dude, I am just trying to live my life." And then, here we are, a brief and quick text from Dad. "Family meeting, 8 p.m., be there?" So I went to the family meeting expecting a lecture, maybe even a fight. I was unprepared for the circus that awaited me. I could feel the tension in the air from the moment I came in. It was like walking onto a stage with the screenplay fully written and I was the only one who hadn't read it. My father answered the door and gave me a disapproving once-over, as if he was already upset by my existence. He did not even say hi. Instead, he simply mumbled, "You're late," and moved aside to allow me in. For context, my father defines late as anything less than 10 minutes early. So, while I was technically on time, he thought I was an hour late. I didn't bother arguing. There was no point. I just shrugged and stepped inside. The house looked precisely the same as it always did. Immaculate, expensive and soulless. Everything in it screamed, "Look how much money we have," from the huge crystal chandelier in the entrance to the immaculately set living room that nobody ever used. It was all simply a big spectacle. And speaking of the living room, that's where everyone was assembled, arranged in a beautiful little semicircle as if they were holding a press conference. Ethan stood on one side, dressed in his regular business casual attire, as if he had just returned from a board meeting. Vanessa was sitting next to him, browsing through her phone and probably appearing to be busy. Daniel was splayed out on a chair, as if he didn't care about anything, but I knew he was enjoying whatever drama was going to develop. Then there was my mother, sitting off to the side like a worried referee, wringing her hands and giving me that tight smile she always gave when things were about to get awkward. Of course, there was my assigned chair, a single lonely seat positioned deliberately in the center of the room, facing everyone. It was so clear that this was an ambush that I nearly laughed. Almost. Dad did not waste any time. As soon as I sat down, he began his speech, emphasizing the value of family unity and heritage preservation. It was all extremely official and rehearsed. At one point, Ethan weighed in with phrases like long-term strategy and brand image, which made me roll my eyes so hard I feared they would get stuck. Vanessa wasn't far behind, commenting on how my decisions were troublesome and how they impacted on the family as a whole. She continued using terms like reputation and status, as if these were the only things that mattered. Daniel didn't say much, and he didn't need to. He was simply sitting there smirking, as if he were watching his favorite television show. I didn't say anything. I simply listened to them, nodding occasionally to give the impression that I was paying attention. To be honest, it was intriguing to see how much effort they had put into the entire process. They truly believed they were conducting some sort of intervention, rescuing me from a life of failure and shame. Finally, Vanessa handed me a folder. She slid it across the coffee table, as if she were presenting me with some sacred document. "This is for the good of the family," she remarked, her tone condescending. I opened the folder and realized how far they were willing to go. Inside were legal papers that were carefully ordered and filled with jargon. I did not need a lawyer to comprehend. The gist was simple. They were cutting me off. No inheritance, no ties to the family business, and no connection to the family name. For a second, I just stared at the papers, not because I was surprised, I could see this coming from a mile away, but because it was ridiculous how serious they were taking this. They truly believed this was some sort of retribution. Dad leaned forward, his voice serious and forceful. "This isn't personal, Alex, It's about business. Your actions have consequences. I raised an eyebrow. My actions? You've made choices that don't align with the family's values, Ethan stated, as if reading from a script. Vanessa nodded. It's not just about you, Alex. It's about all of us. We have to protect the family name. I wanted to laugh but didn't. Instead, I glanced through the documents, appearing to read them thoroughly. Their eyes were fixed on me the entire time, waiting for my reaction. Finally, I looked up and asked, "Where do I sign?" The room went completely silent. I don't think they expected that. My mother was the first to break the stillness. "Alex, wait, don't you think you should?" "Nope," I replied, cutting her off. "This is exactly what you want, right? To cut me loose? Let's get it over with." Vanessa blinked, apparently taken aback. "It's not about cutting you loose, it's about setting boundaries." "Boundaries," I said, smirking. "Sure, let's call it that." Dad motioned to the bottom of the page. "Just sign there." So, I did. I took the pen, scribbled my name at the bottom, and returned the folder to Vanessa. She appeared unsure whether she was relieved or irritated. "Is that all?" I inquired, straightening up. Dad frowned. "This isn't a joke, Alex. One day, you'll understand that this was necessary." I nodded, having already gotten halfway to the door. "Yeah, I'll be sure to send you a thank you card when that day comes." As I went away, I could feel their gaze on my back, but I didn't glance back. They believed they were making a statement, but all they did was prove what I already knew. They did not understand me, and they never will. When I returned to my workshop that night, I felt neither upset nor defeated. Honestly, I was relieved. That family meeting was simply confirmation of something I'd known for years. I was not one of them. They had no notion who I was or what I had built, and they had no desire to find out. I turned on the lights in my workshop, and the hum of the fluorescent lamps was more soothing than anything I'd felt while sitting in that over-decorated house. The place was my sanctuary, with walls lined with tools, shelves packed with bespoke components, and rows of partially completed motorcycles waiting for me to finish them. It was entirely mine, created with my own two hands. My helper, Ben, was still there, working on some late orders. He looked up when I stepped in. "Hey, how'd it go?" he inquired, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "They disowned me," I nonchalantly stated, laying my bag on the workbench. Ben blinked. "Wait, like officially?" "Yep," I answered, taking a half-finished frame from the rack and scrutinizing its welds. "Signed the papers and everything. I'm no longer part of the family." He let out a low whistle. "Damn, you okay?" I shrugged. "Honestly? Yeah. They think they cut me off, but I'm the one who's been carrying them emotionally for years. They did me a favor." We worked in silence for a while, with the only sounds being the buzz of tools and the odd clang of metal. It was peaceful, the kind of peace I had never experienced with my family. A few hours later, I logged onto my business dashboard, and the results made me happy. Orders had skyrocketed. One of our latest designs had become popular in a niche cycling community, and suddenly people were literally throwing money at us. Custom orders, bulk sales from international clients, and even queries from a couple of well-known brands looking to cooperate. It was overwhelming, but in the greatest way. My inbox was swamped with emails, and while the majority were business-related, a couple stuck out. One was from a journalist who wanted to write a piece about me for a lifestyle magazine. Another came from a professional rider who needed a custom bike for their next competition. Then there was the one that gave me pause. A private client offering an insane sum of money for a one-of-a-kind design. I slumped back in my chair, laughing. My family believed I was wasting my life experimenting with bikes, yet it was more profitable than their jewelry business. The truth is, I never cared about money. Don't get me wrong, it's good to be financially secure and not have to worry about bills or debt, but that wasn't the reason I started this. I started it because I like it and wanted to make something with my hands that was both utilitarian and beautiful, something meaningful. What about the money? That was a pleasant bonus. The nicest thing was that it allowed me to keep growing without compromise. I didn't have to answer to anyone, not investors, shareholders, or my family. The following morning, I met with Josh, my business partner, at our favorite diner. Josh is the type of person who is constantly 10 steps ahead of everyone else. He is the reason we have been able to grow the firm so swiftly. "All right," he murmured, sliding into the booth across from me. "What is the plan?" "For what?" I asked as I sipped my coffee. "For dealing with your family," he explained. "They'll come crawling back eventually. Do you know that?" I shrugged. "Allow them, I'm not going to spend my time worrying about them. I have more important things to focus on. Josh smirked. Fair enough. Speaking of broader matters, we need to discuss this. He took out his laptop and showed me an email from one of our vendors. They had offered us an exclusive price on some new materials, but we'd have to commit to a larger manufacturing run than usual. Can we manage it? I asked. Easily, Josh replied. With the orders flowing in, we could treble our output while still having room to breathe. This is an obvious choice. Do it, I instructed. Josh grinned. Done. Things improved over the course of several weeks. The magazine feature debuted, and it was a game changer. The journalist produced a wonderful article about how I transformed a passion for motorcycles into a thriving business, complete with images of our workshop and some of our most popular designs. The answer was crazy. Orders increased overnight, and our social media platforms were flooded with new fans. We had to hire 2 more individuals merely to meet the demand. Ben, who had been with me since the garage days, began teaching the new hires while I focused on developing our next major project. It was exhausting, but in the greatest possible manner. Every now and then, I would think about my family, not in a sad or nostalgic sense, but rather with interest. I wondered if they had read the article or heard about the company. Part of me wanted to tell them simply to see how they reacted, but another part of me wasn't concerned. I was too preoccupied with creating something real, something they would never understand. One day, I received a call from a firm that manufactured high-end outdoor gear. They wanted to collaborate on a limited edition bike for their upcoming product range. It was the type of collaboration that could propel us to the next level, and I couldn't say yes quick enough. Josh and I spent weeks ironing out the details, working late nights to ensure that everything was flawless. By the time the prototypes were completed, I knew we had something unique. The launch was tremendously successful. The bikes sold out in hours, and the hype surrounding the cooperation propelled us to new heights. Suddenly, we were no longer a modest niche business, we were a brand. And during it all, my family remained mute. No call, no text, nothing. I wasn't sure if they were ignoring me or just didn't understand what I was doing. It didn't matter. Their silence did not last long, however. It began with a text. We need to talk. Urgent family matters. Vanessa was the first to break the stillness, as I expected. My siblings were predictable in that regard. She enjoyed being the mediator when things got tense, but her vision of peace usually entailed ensuring that everyone regarded her as the voice of reason. I ignored it. Then came another one, this time from Ethan. Alex, let's meet. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I laughed out loud. Is there a misunderstanding? The same guy who sat there with his impeccable posture, watching me sign away my fortune, suddenly thought we had a slight misunderstanding? Yes, sure, I did not respond to him either. The texts kept coming in over the next 2 days, each one more urgent than the last. Daniel's finally arrived, but he was just as sluggish as he was. Yo, you around? Stuff's happening. Very lyrical, that one. But the one that made me pause was from my father. Come home, we need you. That's when I realized things had changed. Dad didn't ask for anything, he ordered, expected, and demanded. Come home was the closest he'd ever come to pleading. At first, I was unsure whether I wanted to answer. A part of me wanted to see how far they would go. But another part of me knew things would inevitably escalate. It was not in their habit to let things go. They required control, and I wasn't following their rules anymore. A week later, as Josh and I were at the workshop, I received a call from an unknown number. Hello Alex, a familiar voice said, sounding unnecessarily polite. It was Ethan? We need to talk. I rolled my eyes. I got your texts. What do you want? He paused for a second, revealing everything I needed to know. It's about the family business. Ah, there it was? The family company, of course. We're having some challenges, he said, and I could almost hear the pain in his voice as he said it. It's not a great time for us, and we think you could help. I could help? I inquired, leaning back in my chair and smiled. That's interesting. Last time we talked, I was an embarrassment to the family. My choices didn't align with your values, remember? Alex, Ethan murmured, changing into his favorite condescending elder brother voice. Let's not dwell on the past. This is bigger than all of us. I laughed. No, it's not. It's about you, Ethan, and Vanessa, and Dad, and the fact that none of you have any idea how to adapt to a world that's moving faster than you are. He attempted to push back, but I cut him off. I'm busy, Ethan. If the business is struggling, maybe you should have thought about that before you decided I wasn't good enough to be part of the family. I hung up before he could reply. That was satisfactory. Vanessa made her next move a few days later, when she unexpectedly arrived at my workshop. I was in the process of fine-tuning a bespoke build for a new client when I noticed her car pull into the parking lot. She stepped out in her luxury heels and sunglasses, as if she were walking into a nice boutique, not one where grease and metal were the major decor. I met her at the door, not trying to hide my irritation. "What are you doing here?" She flashed me one of her excessively polished smiles. "Alex, we need to talk." "I'm working," I explained, crossing my arms. "This won't take long," she said, moving past me into the workshop. She looked around, evidently displeased with the ordered mess. "So this is what you've been doing? Bikes?" "Yep," I replied, not giving anything else. She groaned and turned to face me. "Look, things aren't great right now. The business is struggling, and Dad's not handling it well. Ethan's trying to hold things together, but..." She trailed off, waiting for me to intervene and save the day. I did not. Finally, she stated, "We need you, Alex." Those comments affected her in a different way than she expected. For years I'd been rejected as the one who didn't measure up. And now? They now needed me. "What exactly do you think I can do?" I inquired, leaning against one of the workbenches. "You've always been good with creative ideas," she added, her tone a touch too sweet. "And you've clearly been doing okay for yourself here." "Okay?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. She flinched, realizing her error. "I didn't mean it like that. We're in trouble, Alex. The market's changing, and we didn't adapt fast enough. Sales are down, and Dad's, well, he's too proud to admit we need help. But Ethan and I think you could bring something new to the table." I stared at her for a long time, letting her words linger in the air. This was Vanessa, the same person who used to mock my small project and once told me I was squandering my talent. And now she was asking for my assistance. It felt nice. "Let me get this straight," I finally remarked. "You want me to come back and fix the business after everything you guys pulled?" She nodded. "We made mistakes, I'll admit that, but we're trying to make things right." I inclined my head, appearing to think about it. "Yeah, no. I'm good." Vanessa's face fell. "Alex, please. This isn't just about us. It's about the legacy." "Your legacy," I corrected her. "Not mine. I already have something I'm proud of, and it doesn't involve begging people to buy overpriced necklaces." Her immaculate mask slipped for a second, and I saw a glimpse of frustration. But before she could say anything else, I unlocked the door and motioned for her to exit. "Have a nice day, Vanessa." Then, a week later, Dad arrived at the workshop, looking more exhausted and worn out than I had ever seen him. He didn't even bother with politeness. "We need to talk," he remarked quietly and seriously. I leaned against the doorframe and crossed my arms. "Do we, though?" He groaned and ran his fingers through his graying hair. "Alex, I'll admit it, we were wrong about you. About everything. The business is failing. I can't fix it. Your brother can't fix it. We need your help." I stared at him for a long time, allowing the weight of his words to settle in. This was the man who had always preached about pride and reputation, and now he was virtually pleading for my help. "I'll think about it," I finally answered, moving aside to let him enter. And that's when I understood the tables had completely turned. When I promised my father I'd think about it, I didn't intend to let them off the hook. If they wanted me to salvage the family business, they'd have to work for it. For the first time in their lives, they needed to know what it was like to not have all the cards. Over the next few days, I let them stew. There are no calls, texts, or anything. I wasn't ignoring them for petty reasons. Okay, maybe only a little. I wanted them to recognize that they were no longer in control. They disowned me like it was nothing, and now they're circling back, trying to bring me on board. I wasn't going to make things simple. Josh, of course, found the whole thing amusing. "So let me get this straight," he began, leaning on the workbench as I adjusted a frame. "They need you to preserve their business, but they haven't apologized, and they certainly haven't admitted how badly they messed up." "Pretty much," I replied, smirking. "And you just let them twist in the wind?" I shrugged. "Feels fair." Josh laughed. "I wish I had your patience. I'd be sticking it in their faces every chance I had." "Oh, don't worry," I said. "They'll get what's coming, but it's not going to be on their terms." A few days later, Vanessa called again. This time, I picked up. "Alex," she exclaimed, sounding too joyful. "Thank you for finally responding. I was beginning to suspect you were avoiding us." I snubbed the bait. "What do you want?" She paused, And I could tell she was trying to figure out how to word the plea she was about to make. I wanted to check in, see if you've given any more thought to, helping out with the family business. I have thought about it, I said. And I have a few conditions. She was silent for a moment. Okay, what types of conditions? I want full control, I murmured, relishing the moment. Here's the plan. I'll take over the business. You will continue to work as employees, with no titles or power. You will respond to me. Vanessa almost choked. Wait, complete control? Alex, that is not negotiable. I shut her off. If you don't like it, find someone else to fix your mess. She stuttered, trying to argue, but I stood strong. She eventually promised to talk to Dad and Ethan and get back to me. My dad returned to the workshop the following day. He appeared more put together this time, but the despair in his eyes was still evident. Vanessa told me about your conditions, he began as soon as he got in. He exhaled. That's a hefty ask, Alex. You're asking us to hand over the firm your mother and I started from the ground up. I leaned on the workbench, crossing my arms. No, I'm asking you to hand over the company that is failing because none of you understand how to change. If you want me to save it, you must let me do it my way. Otherwise, what is the point? He said nothing. For a long time, I could see the inner conflict on his face. Eventually, he nodded. Fine, you can have full control, but there's one condition, he told me. Here we go, I mumbled. I want you to keep the family name attached to the business, he told me. That's all we have left. I thought about it for a bit. It wasn't an outrageous request, and to be honest, I didn't care about the name either way. Deal, I said. The real fun began after the family reluctantly agreed to let me take complete control. I did not waste any time diving in. If they expected this to be a slow, peaceful transition in which they could dispute or second-guess my actions, they were mistaken. This was not a democracy. It was a dictatorship, and I was in charge. The first thing I did after taking over was demolish their beloved hierarchy. Ethan had been conducting operations as if he were auditioning for a reality show about dumb executives. His concept of leadership involved shouting at people when things went wrong and claiming credit when things went right. That was not going to fly. I called a staff meeting in the main office. All managers, department heads, and key personnel were invited. My family also showed up, but they seemed uneasy, sitting off to the side like school children waiting for the principal to scold them. All right, I said, standing at the head of the meeting table. Let us get one thing straight. The previous manner of doing things is obsolete. This company will now be driven by outcomes rather than nepotism. A few others looked anxiously at Ethan, who was staring at me as if I had insulted his entire being. I pointed to the whiteboard behind me, where I had outlined a clear strategy. We are streamlining everything. No more bloated budgets, superfluous overhead, or out-of-date practices. I am interested in hearing your views. If you've been buried beneath layers of bureaucracy, that ends now. This is your moment to show what you are capable of. One of the managers raised their hand. And how about the family? I smirked. They will be held to the same standard as everyone else. No exceptions. Ethan scoffed, but I ignored him. Vanessa appeared to want to burrow beneath the table, while Daniel was half asleep. Classic. I then tackled the stores. Half of them were losing money because they had not been updated in decades. The exhibits were worn, the layouts were unclear, and the employees appeared to be just waiting for someone to put them out of their misery. I instantly shut down the locations with the lowest performance. Some employees were disgruntled, which I understood, but I made sure to provide severance compensation and job placement aid. This was not about punishing somebody, it was about saving the organization. The remaining stores received a comprehensive renovation. I hired designers to remodel the premises, transforming them into clean, minimalist showrooms that focused on products rather than gimmicky sales practices. I also implemented a new inventory system, making it easier for customers to browse and buy, whether in store or online. Speaking of online, this was another key area where the corporation had struggled. Their website appeared to be trapped in 2005, complete with clumsy navigation and fuzzy photos. I scrapped it all and hired a team of developers to create a new website from scratch. It was quick, easy to use, and smartphone optimized. Within weeks of launch, internet sales surged. Then came the product line. This was where I truly put my mark on things. For years, the company produced the same old designs, gaudy, costly jewelry aimed at an older audience. It was okay for the older set, but it utterly ignored younger customers seeking something new and current. I launched a new line centered on minimalist, ecological designs. Consider exquisite items crafted from recycled materials, with an emphasis on craftsmanship and storytelling. Each piece included a card explaining where the materials came from and how they were recycled. It was a hit. People appreciated the concept of owning something unique that didn't harm the environment. Vanessa first despised the idea. She claimed that it was too hazardous and did not meet our clients' expectations. But after the numbers started flooding in, she had to concede I was correct. Of course, not everything went well. I had to deal with a lot of criticism, especially from my own family. Ethan, in particular, seems determined to undercut me at every opportunity. He'd pull me aside after meetings and say things like, "Are you certain this is the best decision? I mean, you're new to this level of management?" I'd just smile and say, "You're welcome to step down if you believe you can't handle the changes." That typically silenced him. And Daniel? Honestly, I had no idea what he was doing half the time. He'd arrive at meetings late, if at all, and offer nothing. I eventually assigned him a tiny responsibility maintaining the company's social media profiles, which kept him busy enough without inflicting any significant damage. Despite the hurdles, the outcomes spoke for themselves. Within 6 months, the company was unrecognizable, in a positive sense. Sales were up across the board, the new product lines were receiving fantastic reviews, and we'd even begun to attract younger, more tech-savvy clients. What is the best part? My family was beginning to sense a power shift. They had spent their entire lives at the top of the food chain, but now they were just like any other employee. They responded to me. One day, I arranged a meeting for just the 4 of us. Myself, Dad, Ethan, and Vanessa. I wanted to make sure they knew exactly where we stood. "Let me be clear," I stated, leaning back in my chair. "I now own this corporation. If you decide to stay, you will do things my way. If you don't like it, there's the door." Dad grimaced, but said nothing. Ethan appeared to want to argue, but Vanessa placed a hand on his arm and shook her head. "I'm serious," I added. "I'm not here to continue the family legacy. I'm here to make something better. If that requires letting go of the past, so be it." For once, nobody had anything to say. The turning point came when one of the industry's largest trade exhibitions encouraged us to present the new collection. It was the type of event that could make or destroy a company's reputation, and I was determined to leave an impression. I designed the booth myself, providing a sleek, immersive experience that emphasized the company's sustainable innovations while also telling the tale of its transformation. My family was present, of course, but this time I was the star of the show. Customers, journalists, and industry experts rushed to our exhibit, admiring the new approach and questioning how we'd turned things around so rapidly. I made every effort to give credit where it was due, particularly to the staff who had worked tirelessly to make it happen. As I saw people admire the pieces I helped make, I felt a surge of pride that I had never felt before. This wasn't just about preserving a business, it was about showing to myself, and to them, that I was capable of far more than they had previously given me credit for. By the end of the show, we had secured several new collaborations, and the brand was more popular than ever. My family was finally realizing that I wasn't just the black sheep anymore, I was leading the charge. Then one day, it occurred. This was the moment I had been waiting for. We had just finished a quarterly review meeting, and I had delivered some of the best data the company had ever seen. My father cleared his throat just as I was about to finish the lecture. "Alex," he whispered, his voice as gentle as I had ever heard it, "I just wanted to say how proud I am of you. You have accomplished something that none of us could have done. You did more than just salvage the business, you improved it." The room became silent. Even Ethan and Vanessa appeared astonished. "Thanks," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Vanessa joined in. "Dad is right, we should have seen your potential sooner. You've taken this company to places we never imagined possible." Ethan nodded, grudgingly. "You proved everyone incorrect." I can admit that. It was weird to hear them admit it out loud. "We've been talking," Dad said, looking at the others. "We'd like to fix things, not just the business, but us, the family." There it was, the apology and the olive branch. I sat back in my chair, allowing their comments to hang in the air for a minute. "I appreciate that," I said. "But let's be honest, you didn't want me in the family until I proved useful. That is not something I can forget." Vanessa looked down, obviously uncomfortable, but she did not object. "I'm not interested in pretending things are fine. Our current system is functional. We're working together, and that's it. I don't need anything else." Ethan frowned. "Come on, Alex, we are family. We made mistakes, but we're striving to make things right." "You're trying to make it right because you have no choice," I responded calmly. "If this firm had failed, you would not be here today. Let us not change history. Dad seemed to want to argue, but then sighed and nodded. Fair enough. Here's the deal, I explained, rising up and gathering my notes. I will remain operating the firm, and you will continue to do your tasks, but aside from that, we're okay where we are. No more pretending to have a happy family. We tried that, but it didn't work. When I left the meeting, the room was quiet, but I didn't feel awful about it. I wasn't angry, nor was I resentful. I knew exactly where I stood, and I was not going to let them cross that line again. Now to the next story 8. My jealous sister accused me of being a gold digger and tried to ruin my boyfriend's career. My parents took her side as always. Hello, everyone, I don't know where to start. I suppose I've always been the other sister. My name is Lindsay, and I'm 29 years old. I grew up in the shadow of my older sister, Melanie, who is now 34. It feels like my entire life has been spent trying to measure up to her, but I never could, at least not in my parents' eyes. Melanie has always been the golden child. I recall as a child seeing how easily everything appeared to fall into place for her. She was the star of every school play, the captain of her soccer team, and the straight-A student who my parents couldn't stop talking about. Meanwhile, I was simply Lindsay, the quiet one. The girl who enjoyed drawing in her sketchbook but did not shine in the ways that mattered to them. It wasn't as if I hadn't tried. I put myself into art because it was the one thing I thought I was good at. But even that wasn't enough. I recall one particular day well. During a parent-teacher conference, my middle school art instructor informed my mother that I had true talent and that if I worked hard enough, I might be able to receive a college scholarship. I felt very proud and excited. But when we arrived home, my mother replied, "That's nice, honey, but it's not like art is a real career. Melanie's already studying for the SATs. Maybe focus on something practical." This shattered me. I was 12. I did not wish to be practical. I wanted them to be proud of me, even if it was for reasons other than Melanie. But the favoritism did not end there. My parents gave Melanie every possible benefit. They paid for her piano lessons, individual tutoring, and pricey summer camps, which she didn't appear to like. When it came to me, however, the funding was tight, or so they claimed. I asked for painting lessons, even cheap ones at the community center, but they always answered, "No, we just can't afford it right now, Lindsay." They did, however, manage to finance a new car for Melanie when she reached 16. Regarding that car, here's a story that still makes my blood boil. On my 16th birthday, I convinced myself that this was finally my time. If Melanie gets a car, maybe they'll surprise me with one as well. Instead, I received a sweater. A sweater. I'm not ungrateful, I understand not every child gets a car. But what about the kicker? Melanie arrived home from college with a flat tire. And guess who got to wait and watch my father spend hours mending it while my birthday cake lay untouched on the counter? Happy birthday to me. And it's not simply the material aspects that sting, it's the emotional neglect. My mother constantly praised Melanie, saying things like, "You're so beautiful, you're so smart, and you're going to do amazing things." I can't remember the last time she said that to me. I was ecstatic to get my first job at a tiny graphic design agency. But my mother's response was, "That's nice, but when are you going back to school?" You know, Melanie got her master's degree. I tried talking to my father about it once. He's quieter than my mother and more passive. I asked him why it seemed like they loved Melanie more than me. He groaned, looked uneasy, and continued. "We don't love her more, Lindsay. She just needs us more." What the heck does that even mean? Is she in more need of them? She had everything handed to her. If anyone required assistance, it was me. As I became older, the gap between us widened. Melanie went on to greater and better things, an Ivy League degree, a high-paying job in finance, and a sparkling engagement ring from her equally beautiful fiancé. And me, I felt stuck. My art career didn't take off as I had hoped. And every time I saw my folks, they'd say, "So, what's next?" As if what I'd done so far wasn't enough. One of the most humiliating experiences occurred last Thanksgiving. Melanie and her fiancé, Jason, came over for supper, and my parents went all out, prime rib, fine wine, the works. I brought a pumpkin pie that I had made myself, which I was very proud of considering I am not much of a cook. When I placed it on the table, my mother gave me a tight little smile and said, "Oh sweetie, that's nice, but Melanie brought a cheesecake from that bakery downtown. Everyone loves their desserts." Guess which one was devoured first? Melanie not only receives all of the adulation, but she also appears to ignore it. She pretends not to notice the partiality, but I believe she enjoys being the center of attention. Years ago, I tried to confront her about it. I told her it was unfair that Mom and Dad treated us differently. She stared at me with wide-eyed innocence and said, "Lindsay, you're being ridiculous. Mom and Dad love us equally." Then she turned around and uploaded a picture on Instagram with the remark, "My parents are the best," over a shot of the new watch they bought her just because. I feel as if I've been gaslit my entire life. Every time I try to express my feelings, I am met with either denial or sympathy. "You're overreacting, Lindsay," or, "Oh, you poor thing," as if I were a frail little flower incapable of handling her feelings. It is exhausting. I've been growing increasingly distant from my family. I stopped coming to family gatherings and called my mother solely to learn about Melanie's recent successes. I've been focusing on my painting again, attempting to rekindle the passion I had as a child before their relentless comparison drained everything from me. But it's hard. No matter how much I try to remove myself, that voice in the back of my head continually screams, "You'll never be good enough." I guess what I'm wondering is, am I crazy for feeling this way? Is it inappropriate to want my parents to see me for who I am, rather than who I am not? Or am I doomed to live the rest of my life in Melanie's shadow? After years of feeling stuck, I eventually discovered what I considered to be a nice place. I'd been working as a freelance graphic designer, gradually developing a portfolio that I was proud of. It wasn't a glamorous job, but I adored it. For once, I felt in charge of my life, free from incessant comparisons to Melanie. That's when I met Zach. It was a random meeting at a small business exhibition that I attended to network. I was standing awkwardly near a kiosk, browsing through leaflets, when he approached me. He was tall, with dark hair that had just the proper amount of gray at the temples, and he exuded effortless confidence, which I noticed straight away. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he replied, smirking. I laughed, slightly ashamed. "Is it that obvious?" He presented himself as Zach, the founder of a modest but thriving technology startup that creates software for small businesses. As we talked, I discovered that he was 36, self-employed, and had created his business from the ground up. Zach, unlike many of the folks I'd met at these occasions, was neither pretentious or overbearing. When I explained about my business, he listened and asked questions about my design process and the types of clients I dealt with. It felt refreshing. We kept in touch for a few weeks. Zach was more than just nice and charming. He was intelligent, ambitious, and truly interested in what I had to say. He asked me to create some branding materials for his company, and working with him was fantastic. He treated me as an equal, which was unusual for me after being dominated by Melanie for so long. When Zach and I started dating, it felt like a breath of fresh air. For the first time, I felt recognized, not as Melanie's sister or the less successful daughter, but as Lindsay. He wasn't concerned about my family dynamics or the baggage I carried. He cared for me. Of course, Melanie had to spoil it. At first, my parents appeared cautiously enthusiastic about Zach. They loved his success, though my mother couldn't help but make snarky remarks like, "Well, he's a bit older, isn't he?" Or, "I hope he's serious about you." Melanie, on the other hand, despised him from the start. I should have seen it coming. Melanie delights on being the center of attention, the one everyone envies. Zach's accomplishments made her feel threatened. She couldn't believe I'd found someone who was not only nice and helpful, but also extremely accomplished in his own right. So, in classic Melanie flair, she sought to instigate drama. It began quietly. Melanie mentioned during a family meal how handy it was that I met Zach while working on a project for him. "So, did you land the guy and the client?" she joked, loud enough for everyone to hear. I attempted to shrug it off, but the inference was clear. She assumed I was just dating Zach for his money. Things swiftly escalated after that. Melanie began spreading tales throughout our family, claiming that Zach was some type of sugar daddy. She even told my parents that I was exploiting him to escape my dismal career. "I just think Lindsay's rushing into things," she'd say, pretending to worry. "It's not like she's ever dated someone like Zach before. You have to admit, it's a big step up." What is the worst part? My parents believed her. My mother confronted me one night after dinner. "Lindsay," she asked, her tone concerned, "are you sure Zach is the right man for you? He's so established. I just don't want you to get hurt if this doesn't work out." "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "Zach and I are happy. Why can't you just let me have this?" Mom hesitated. "It's just..." Melanie mentioned some things. "Of course, she did," I added. "Because Melanie can't stand it when the attention isn't on her." I stormed out that night, but the damage had already been done. The seeds of mistrust had been sowed, and no matter how much I defended myself, it seemed as if my family had already made up their minds. The rumors did not end with my family. Melanie began sharing them around mutual friends. People I hadn't spoken with in years. One day, I received a phone call from Sarah, an old high school classmate I hadn't spoken with in years. "Hey, Lindsay," she said nervously. "I just wanted to check in. I heard some things about Zach and wanted to make sure you're okay." "Wait, what things?" I inquired, puzzled. Sarah hesitated. "Well, Melanie mentioned that Zach might be, controlling. She said you've been spending all your time with him and barely talking to your family anymore. I just wanted to make sure everything's all right." I was infuriated. "Sarah, that's not true. Zach is nothing like that. Melanie's just..." I paused, recognizing there was no use in explanation. Melanie had already caused harm. When I challenged her about it, she claimed to be the victim. "I was just worried about you," she explained, wide-eyed and innocent. "I didn't mean for it to get blown out of proportion. You know how people love to gossip. You're the one who started the gossip," I yelled. "Why can't you just be happy for me for once?" Melanie didn't care. She never does. All she cared about was bringing me down and keeping me in the shadow, where she believed I belonged. Throughout it all, Zach was my rock. "Lindsay," he remarked one night as we sat on his couch, "you don't owe anyone an explanation for our relationship. Not your parents, not Melanie, not anyone. The people who really care about you will see the truth." He could see how much it was hurting me and did everything he could to encourage me. I wanted to believe him, but it was difficult. Melanie's falsehoods made me feel increasingly lonely. Even some of my closest friends became distant, as if they didn't know what to think. It seemed like I was waging a lost battle, while Melanie was winning. But Zach was correct in one thing. Those who genuinely cared about me stood by my side. My best friend Emily was among them. When she heard what Melanie was saying, she quickly called me. "Lindsay, this is ridiculous," she said. "Anyone who knows you knows you're not that kind of person. Melanie's just jealous. She can't stand that you're happy." Hearing those words meant more to me than I could convey. For the first time in weeks, I felt less alone. Zach, for his part, refused to be swayed by the reports. If anything, they only strengthened us. He saw through Melanie's tactics and refused to allow her harm our relationship. "She can say whatever she wants," he told me. "At the end of the day, the only thing that matters is us." He was correct. Melanie could spread as many stories as she wanted, but she couldn't take away what Zach and I had created together. For the first time in my life, I wasn't simply Lindsay, the other sister. I was Lindsay, the woman who had found love and happiness despite everything Melanie had thrown at her. I used to believe that things couldn't get worse following Melanie's initial rumors about Zach. I was mistaken. Melanie wasn't simply out to ruin my family's opinion of me. She launched her campaign on social media, dragging my name through the mud for all to see. It began softly, as many of Melanie's shenanigans did. She shared a photo of herself and her husband Jason, in front of their huge suburban home. The headline read, "It's amazing what you can achieve with hard work and dedication. Some of us don't need shortcuts." I realized it was about me. The timing was absolutely great. Zach and I had just shared photos from a weekend trip to Napa Valley, which Melanie would have undoubtedly seen. I attempted to ignore her posts, but they got more pointed. A few days later, another photo showed her holding an expensive handbag with the message, "Bought this with my own money, because, some of us don't rely on others to fund our lifestyles." The worst one, however, was a photo of her standing in her garden with a smug smile, holding a coffee cup that read "Girl Boss." The caption, "It's amazing how some people will do anything for a free life." Her friends and acquaintances chimed in, some even tagging me directly in their replies. I was upset, but I wasn't sure what to do. Part of me wanted to confront her publicly in order to defend myself, but Zach urged me otherwise. "She's baiting you," he remarked. "If you respond, you're giving her exactly what she wants." He was correct, of course, but that didn't make things any easier. Every time I opened my social media, there it was. Her smug expression, passive-aggressive captions, an army of accomplices. It felt like she was waging war against me, and I didn't even have a weapon to defend myself. A few weeks later, things escalated during a family meal. My parents had invited everyone over for what they called a relaxing evening. I should have known better. Nothing about being in the same room with Melanie could possibly be relaxing. Melanie was on edge from the time Zach and I stepped in. She welcomed us with a phony smile and an overly bright, "Oh, hi, you too." But her tone was tinged with sarcasm. She hardly acknowledged Zach, instead concentrating her entire attention on Jason, making a huge deal of questioning him about his career, their forthcoming vacation, and his plans to remodel their already exquisite kitchen. Dinner began uneventfully enough. My mother had prepared one of her hallmark dishes, roast chicken with all the fixings, and the discussion was primarily small talk. However, Melanie, ever the limelight seeker, felt it was time to stir the pot. She leaned back in her chair, whirling her wine glass like a villain from a soap opera, and said, "You know, it's funny. I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and she mentioned how some people are living the dream of all money hunters." The table became silent. My father coughed awkwardly. My mother gave Melanie a warning glance, but she disregarded it. "I mean," she continued, her gaze riveted on mine. "Imagine finding someone who's willing to pay for everything. Your vacations, your lifestyle, even your career. Must be nice, right?" Zach stiffened alongside me. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, but I wouldn't let her see me crack. "Are you trying to say something, Melanie?" I inquired, keeping my voice as quiet as I could. "Oh no, of course not," she responded innocently. "I'm just making an observation. Some people have all the luck." "Luck has nothing to do with it," Zach interrupted, his voice low but forceful. "Lindsay works hard, and she doesn't need to rely on anyone to support her." Melanie smirked. "Oh, I'm sure she does. I mean, graphic design is such a stable and lucrative career path. I'm sure you don't help out at all, right?" "Enough." My mother's voice sliced through the tension like a dagger. "Melanie, stop it, this isn't appropriate." But Melanie wasn't done. She slammed her glass down with a bit too much vigor, the sound reverberating around the room. "I'm just being honest, Mom. Isn't that what we're supposed to do as a family? Be honest with each other?" I could not handle it anymore. I sprang up so rapidly that my chair almost crashed over. "Honesty? You wouldn't know honesty if it hit you in the face. All you know how to do is tear people down because you can't stand it when the spotlight isn't on you." "Lindsay, don't," Zach murmured calmly, placing his hand on my arm. But I was beyond the point of caring. "Do you know what your problem is, Melanie?" I asked, my voice quivering with wrath. "You can't stand the fact that someone else might actually be happy for once. You thrive on making other people feel small because that's the only way you can feel big." Melanie's face flushed hot, but she did not answer. My father said something about everyone needing to calm down, but I didn't want to hear his half-hearted attempts at mediation. I grabbed my coat and turned to face Zach. "Let's go." We went without saying anything, the tension in the room so heavy that I felt like I was suffocating on it. I burst into tears as soon as we arrived at the car. "I can't do this anymore," I wept. "I can't keep pretending everything's fine when she's destroying my life." Zach drew me into his arms, his words calming. "You don't have to. You don't owe her or anyone else in your family anything. You've worked hard for what you have, and you don't need to justify it to anyone, least of all Melanie." He was correct, of course, but as much as I wanted to wipe Melanie out of my life entirely, I knew it wouldn't be that easy. She was more than just my sister. She was my parents' darling, the golden child. Cutting her out would also mean cutting them out, which I wasn't sure I was prepared for. The next few days were a jumble of emotions: rage, despair, and frustration. I blocked Melanie on all social media platforms, not wanting to see any more of her passive-aggressive posts, but the damage had already been done. Friends and acquaintances who had seen her posts were immediately asking questions, their tone tinged with thinly veiled condemnation. "You're not actually dating him for his money, are you?" One of them questioned me directly. "No," I snapped. "I'm not." But the stories lingered, and Melanie's shadow became larger than ever. No matter how hard I tried to get away, it felt like she was always one step ahead, ready to drag me down. After that horrible family meal, I knew I couldn't keep putting myself through Melanie's games. Every interaction with her seemed like a landmine about to detonate, and I was done falling into her traps. Zach and I talked about it, and we both agreed I needed to take a step back for my own sanity. I needed to set some boundaries, even if it meant missing family occasions. The first test came a few weeks later, when my parents said they would be having a cookout. "It'll be fun," my mother stated over the phone, her tone far too enthusiastic. "Jason and Melanie are coming, and you can bring Zach. We haven't seen you two in ages." I paused. "I don't think that's a good idea, Mom." She heaved an impatient sigh that made me feel like a troublesome child. "Oh, Lindsay, don't be like this. It's just a little barbecue. You're not still upset about what Melanie said, are you?" "Are you still upset?" I asked incredulously. "Mom, she basically accused me of being a gold digger in front of the whole family, and that's not even mentioning all the crap she's been posting online." Mom dismissed it with a giggle. "Oh honey, you know how Melanie is. She doesn't mean half of what she says. You two just need to talk things out." "No, Mom," I replied firmly. "What I need is for her to stop attacking me every chance she gets. Until that happens, I'm not going to any event where she's present. There was a prolonged pause. Finally, she remarked, "Well, I think you're overreacting, but if that's how you feel." It wasn't the answer I was hoping for, but she didn't go any further. Zach and I spent the weekend hiking instead, enjoying the solitude and quiet of the trails away from Melanie's toxic presence. But my absence was not unnoticed. A few days later, my father called, his tone pleasant but with that hint of disappointment I'd heard so many times before. "Lindsay, your mother told me you didn't come to the barbecue because of Melanie. Is that true?" "Yes, Dad," I said, bracing myself for the scolding I knew was coming. "Lindsay," he replied. "She's your sister. Families fight sometimes, but that doesn't mean you just walk away. Your mom and I raised you both better than that." I felt a knot form in my throat. "Dad, this isn't just a fight. This is years of Melanie tearing me down, and I'm not going to put up with it anymore. I have to protect myself." He exhaled. "I get that you're upset, but don't let this destroy the family. You two need to find a way to work things out." Destroy the family? The word struck me like a punch in the gut. It was the same guilt trip strategy my parents had used throughout my life to keep me in line, and I was sick of it. "I'm not the one destroying the family, Dad," I murmured, my voice trembling. "If you want to blame someone, blame Melanie." However, he did not. He never would. Over the next 2 months, I stuck to my decision. I denied any invitations from my parents to events attended by Melanie. "Let us know when you're hosting something without Melanie," I'd propose. They never did. Every time I turned them down, they'd say I was being harsh, Melanie was doing her best, and I was letting a minor misunderstanding destroy everything. What they didn't realize, or refused to recognize, was that this was not a misunderstanding. This was a pattern of conduct that had persisted throughout my life, and I was not going to continue submitting myself to it merely to keep the peace. The distance from my family was difficult, but it also allowed me to focus on myself. I immersed myself into my business, accepting new clients and developing my portfolio. Zach was my biggest supporter, always there to encourage me and remind me of my worth when I was doubting myself. Slowly but steadily, I began to feel like I was reclaiming my identity. Lindsay, the artist, the partner, the woman who did not want her family's approval to be complete. Melanie, on the other hand, was not satisfied with the status quo. One afternoon, my dearest friend Emily called me. "Hey, have you seen Melanie's latest post?" she inquired, her tone tinged with alarm. "No," I replied, my stomach sinking. "What did she do now?" Emily hesitated. "She posted this picture from your parents' anniversary dinner, and the caption said, 'Some of us actually show up for our family. Watch ya, family first.'" I groaned. "Unbelievable. She can't stand that I'm not playing her game anymore, so now she's trying to make me look like the bad guy." Emily sighed. "I know it's hard, but don't let her get to you. You're doing the right thing by setting boundaries." I wanted to believe her, but guilt was gnawing at me. Every time I saw a picture of my family without me, every time I heard my mother's disappointed tone or my father's angry sighs, I felt as if I had failed them. It didn't matter that I was defending myself. Part of me still craved their acceptance and validation. The breaking point occurred a few weeks later, when my parents asked Zach and me to supper. "It'll just be the 4 of us," Mom said. "No, Melanie, no drama." I reluctantly agreed. I wanted to believe they were finally listening to me and understanding where I was coming from. However, when we arrived, there was a 5th-place setting on the table. My heart fell. "Please tell me that's not for who I think it is," I requested. Before my mother could respond, the doorbell rang. Melanie strolled in moments later, smiling. "Oh, Lindsay, I didn't know you'd be here," she remarked, her tone full of feigned astonishment. I turned to my parents. "Are you serious? You lied to me." "Lindsay, please," Mom begged. "We just thought if you two spent some time together, you could work things out." I shook my head, tears of fury and betrayal welling up in my eyes. "You don't get it, do you? I'm not the problem here." "She is." Melanie gasped and clutched her chest in mock indignation. "Me? What did I do?" I could not handle it anymore. "You know exactly what you did, Melanie. You've spent our entire lives tearing me down, and I'm done pretending it's okay. I'm done being your punching bag." She smirked. "Oh, please. You're so sensitive, Lindsay. Maybe if you stopped playing the victim all the time, people would actually take you seriously." That was it. I grasped Zach's hand and turned to face my parents. "If you can't respect my boundaries, then I can't be part of this family anymore." My mother started to cry. My father seemed to want to say something but didn't know what. Melanie simply stood there, looking as smug as ever. As we walked out, Zach squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing," he replied. I wanted to believe him, but all I could feel was grief. For the first time in what seemed like an eternity, life was peaceful. Zach and I had discovered a rhythm together, a kind of sanctuary away from the drama that my family was continually causing. I was still separated from my parents and Melanie, but I felt no remorse. I'd spent too much of my life bending over backwards to please them. I was now focused on my own happiness. When Zach proposed, their happiness increased tenfold. We were on vacation and stayed at a beautiful home on a remote island. It was the kind of paradise I could only imagine: pristine beaches, lush foliage, and a villa straight out of a tourist brochure. Zach planned the entire vacation as a surprise for our 2-year anniversary. He urged me to pack my luggage but didn't tell where we were going, just that it would be exceptional. The proposal took place on the second night, following a romantic dinner on the balcony facing the ocean. As the sun sank, the sky turned orange and purple, and the sound of waves breaking against the shore provided the ideal backdrop. I was savoring the scenery when Zach abruptly dropped to one knee, clutching a little velvet box in his palm. "Lindsay," he replied, his voice steady but full of passion. "The last 2 years with you have been the happiest of my life. You have shown me what it means to truly love and be loved. I hope to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" I was so overwhelmed that I could barely speak. As I nodded, tears flowed down my cheeks, and my heart felt like it was about to burst with excitement. "Yes," I eventually managed to say. "Yes, of course, I'll marry you." The ring was stunning, a basic yet elegant design featuring a single diamond that glittered like the stars above us. It wasn't gaudy or over the top, and I appreciated that Zach had chosen something so perfect for me. We spent the remainder of the evening partying, sipping champagne beneath the stars, and fantasizing about our future together. For once, I felt like my life was mine, not defined by my family's expectations or Melanie's shadow, but by the love and pleasure I'd created with Zach. When we returned from our trip, we began arranging the wedding. Neither of us wanted anything large or ostentatious. We both preferred closeness over show. We settled on a small ceremony with only 25 guests, close friends and family members who had been supportive of our relationship since the beginning. Melanie was clearly not on the guest list. My parents' invitation required a more hard decision. I struggled with it for weeks, divided between wanting them to be there and fearing the drama they may cause. Finally, I decided to accept them, but I made it clear that if they brought Melanie as a guest, they would be instantly uninvited. "This is my day," I informed them honestly. "I'm not going to let her ruin it." The site was ideal, a quaint winery secluded in the countryside, with rolling hills and scenic views. The wedding would be held in an outside garden, followed by dinner and dancing beneath a canopy of fairy lights. Zach and I collaborated closely with Amanda, a wedding planner who helped us bring our vision to life. She was a godsend, keeping things on track and making sure no details were neglected. Of course, Melanie learned about the wedding. I'm still unsure how. My parents said they didn't tell her, but I wouldn't put it past them to accidentally reveal it. Once she knew, the sabotage began. It all started with rumors. Melanie called up extended family members who hadn't been invited, explaining that I had purposefully excluded them because I thought I was too good for the family. She informed one cousin that the wedding was being held at a fancy, costly vineyard and that I was wasting Zach's money like it was going out of style. "She's always been jealous of me," Melanie allegedly stated. "This whole wedding is just her way of trying to one-up me." I learned about the rumors from my Aunt Karen, who contacted me one evening, apparently disturbed. "Is it true, Lindsay, that you are not inviting anyone from your family except then your parents?" she asked. "Aunt Karen, that's not true," I exclaimed, my wrath boiling over. "We are having a simple wedding, that is all. It's not about excluding somebody. It's about maintaining intimacy." "Well, Melanie's been saying some things," she admitted. "I just thought you should know." I thanked her for the heads up and hung up, my hands quivering in anger. Zach spotted me pacing the living room and grumbling under my breath. "She's unbelievable," I complained. "She's spreading lies about me to the entire family just because I didn't invite her to my wedding." Zach wrapped his arms around me, his calm presence grounding me. "Let her say whatever she wants," he muttered. "The individuals that matter understand the truth. Do not let her steal your joy." He was correct, of course, but it didn't make things any easier. Melanie's rumors sparked a chain reaction, and I soon found myself getting calls and messages from distant relatives demanding to know why they hadn't been invited. It was exhausting, but I wouldn't let it impede my plans. When the wedding day arrived, I was a bundle of jitters. Not because of Melanie. Amanda had informed me that the venue had strict security measures in place and that no unauthorized guests would be admitted, but because I wanted everything to be flawless. As I stood in the bridal suite, looking in the mirror, I felt a sense of peace come over me. My gown was simple but lovely, a flowing A-line with delicate lace embellishments and a soft champagne color. My dearest friend Emily stood alongside me, smiling as she adjusted my veil. "You look incredible," she replied. "Zach's going to lose it when he sees you." The ceremony was all I had imagined it would be. As I came down the aisle, my heart leaped when I saw Zach waiting for me, his eyes full of love and pride. We exchanged meaningful and highly personal vows, and when we said "I do," there wasn't a dry eye in the yard. The reception was equally as wonderful. The meal was exquisite, the wine flowed freely, and the dance floor was filled with laughing and happiness. My parents behaved appropriately, though I could sense my mother was uncomfortable without Melanie. Still, for once, the spotlight was on me. Not on family conflict or sibling rivalry, but on the love Zach and I shared. As the night came to a close, I found myself sitting with Emily and a few other close friends, reminiscing on everything that had led up to this point. "You did it," Emily remarked, raising her glass in toast. "You stuck up for yourself and achieved pleasure. That is what matters." Following the wedding, Zach and I hoped Melanie would finally leave us alone. But of course, that was too much to ask. Instead, her toxic behavior worsened. She began spreading even more ridiculous accusations, not only about me but also about Zach. According to Melanie, Zach had a history of dominating his partners, had been sued for fraud in the past, and was using his fortune to influence me into separating from my family. Of course, it was all falsehoods, but the sheer arrogance of it was terrible. The worst aspect was that her lies began to damage Zach's professional reputation. One of his business associates, Mark, called him to inquire about the lawsuit. At first, Zach was perplexed. But when Mark mentioned that he had learned about it through a mutual acquaintance, it was evident that Melanie was the source. This was the last straw for Zach. He was not the kind to exacerbate situations unnecessarily, but this wasn't simply petty family drama anymore. It was defamation, and it was beginning to harm his livelihood. Zach decided to pursue legal action. He contacted his lawyer, Andrea, a no-nonsense woman who had handled his business contracts for many years. Andrea acted quickly when Zach explained the problem. "We'll draft a cease and desist letter immediately," she told me. "If she doesn't comply, we'll escalate to a defamation lawsuit." The letter was mailed a few days later. I hadn't seen it, but Zach assured me that it was clear and left no room for interpretation. It detailed all of Melanie's fraudulent assertions, requested that she stop making defamatory statements immediately, and warned that failing to comply would result in legal action. Zach's tone when discussing it was calm but forceful. "This isn't just about us, Lindsay," he told me. "People like Melanie won't stop unless forced to. She needs to learn that her actions have repercussions." Melanie did not take it well, as one could expect. The day after she received the letter, she called my mother in tears, accusing Zach of bullying her and attempting to destroy her life. My mother, of course, called me right away, her voice filled with guilt-tripping concern. "Lindsay, what is happening? Melanie claims Zach is threatening her with a lawsuit. Isn't that a little extreme?" "She's lying, Mom," I responded, attempting to remain cool. "Zach's not threatening her. He's urging her to stop telling lies about us. She, not him, is ruining people's lives here." "But she's your sister," my mother explained, as if that justified everything. "Can't you two talk it out?" "No, Mom," I snapped. "We tried that, and it obviously didn't work. This is more than simply family conflict, she's breaking the law. If you don't comprehend that, perhaps you're part of the problem." Mom didn't say much after that, but I knew she still supported Melanie. It stung, but by this stage, I was used to it. Melanie's life began to fall apart as the legal pressure increased. Her toxic behavior had alienated many of her friends over the years, and this current incident appeared to be the last straw for a few of them. I heard through the grapevine that numerous people had cut ties with her because they were tired of the continual manipulation and drama she introduced into their lives. Sarah, one of her closest friends, reached out to me. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for ever believing Melanie's lies," Sarah told me. "She's been saying nasty things about you and Zach for years, but now I realize it's all envy. She's toxic, and I can't be around her any longer." It was reassuring to hear, but also heartbreaking. Melanie had always been surrounded by people who adored her, yet her actions had caused her to lose many relationships. Now those bridges were crumbling one by one. She was also struggling financially. Jason, her husband, had lately lost his job, and without it, they were struggling to keep up their extravagant lifestyle. Melanie refused to downsize, claiming they could wait it out, but debts were piling up. Credit card debt, house bills, and the expenditures of living the fashionable lifestyle were catching up with her. Eventually, everything came crumbling down. Jason petitioned for divorce, alleging irreconcilable differences. According to what I heard, he had gotten tired of her continual desire for attention and refusal to accept responsibility for her actions. Melanie's situation deteriorated much further after her divorce. She lost her house and most of her belongings and was forced to move in with my parents. I wish I could feel sorry for her, but I don't. Melanie had spent her entire life putting others down in order to boost her own status, and now she was reaping the benefits. Even yet, it was difficult not to feel some residual anger when I heard my mother discuss assisting Melanie in getting back on her feet. "She's going through a tough time," Mom said one day during one of our few phone calls. "We're just trying to be there for her." "Of course you are," I replied, unable to hide my contempt. "Hasn't she always been your priority?" "That's not fair, Lindsay," Mom exclaimed, protective as usual. "She is your sister. Don't you worry about what happens to her?" "No, Mom," I replied simply. "I care about what happens to me and Zach, and I'm not going to let her drag us down with her." It was a harsh statement, but it was true. I'd spent far too much of my life thinking about Melanie, about how to deal with her drama and how to convince my parents of the harm she was creating. I was now focused on defending myself and the life I had created with Zach. Melanie appeared to fade away from my radar over time. The legal letter had worked. She ceased spreading lies about us, and we were finally at peace. Zach and I immersed ourselves into our profession and our relationship, creating a life founded on love and mutual respect. My relationship with my parents remained tense, but I had come to realize that certain things would never change. Every now and again, I received updates about Melanie from family members. She was still living with my parents and struggling to reconstruct her life. Part of me wondered if she'd learned anything from this, but I doubted it. Melanie is the type of person who rarely changes. Finally, I understood I didn't need her to provide me with closure. I didn't require an apology or recognition of the grief she had inflicted. What I needed to do was move forward, leave the past behind, and concentrate on the future. And this is exactly what I did. It took years, literally years, for my parents to understand what I had been attempting to tell them throughout my life. For as long as I could remember, they had overlooked, justified, and even glorified Melanie's behavior, regardless of how toxic or harmful it was. However, as the consequences of her acts became apparent, they were unable to ignore the reality any longer. I initially noticed the shift when on the phone with my father. Melanie had returned to live with them months before, and I had kept my distance. My parents periodically tried to contact me, but our chats were difficult. This time, however, my father sounded different. Tired and worn out in a way I had never heard before. "How are you doing, Lindsay?" he inquired, his tone surprisingly mild. "I feel like we haven't really talked in a while." "I'm fine, Dad," I replied cautiously. "Busy with work, you know." There was a gap before he sighed. I wanted to say I'm sorry." The words took me off guard. "I'm sorry for what?" "For everything," he said. "For not listening to you and not noticing what Melanie was doing. Your mom and I have discussed how badly we have let you down." I wasn't sure what to say. For years, I had imagined hearing those words, my parents finally admitting the pain they had caused by continuously side with Melanie. But now that the moment had arrived, it seemed strange. "Dad," I asked softly, "what brought this on?" "Melanie," he acknowledged. "Getting her back in the house has been eye-opening, to say the least. The way she speaks to your mother, the way she blames everyone else for her problems, it is tiresome. It has made us realize that we have allowed her to get away with far too much for far too long. Part of me wanted to be vindicated, but largely I felt tired." "I appreciate the apology," I responded. "But it doesn't change what happened." "I know," he replied swiftly. "I do not expect it to. I just wanted you to know that we see it now, and we apologize." A few days later, my mother called. She was never as forthright as my father, but her message was consistent. "We didn't do right by you, Lindsay," she admitted, her voice thick with sorrow. "We ignored Melanie's behavior because it was simpler than confronting it, and as a result, we damaged you. I'm very sorry." Hearing their comments was a step forward, but it did not alleviate years of sorrow. I told them so. "I need time," I explained. "This isn't something I can just forgive overnight." They appeared to understand, and for the first time, they didn't try to force me to move quicker than I was willing to. Not long after, I received a letter. It came from Melanie. Seeing her handwriting on the envelope filled me with dread. I hesitated whether or not to open it, but my curiosity won out. The letter was long, many pages of carefully written text, and as I read it, I couldn't help but feel a range of emotions. Melanie apologized for everything, the lies, the manipulation, and the years spent undermining and making me feel tiny. She stated that envy drove most of her actions, but she did not go into detail about what she was envious of. She apologized for spreading stories about Zach, causing tension at family events, and capitalizing on years of favoritism. "I know I've hurt you in ways I can't undo," she wrote, "but I want you to know that I sincerely apologize. I've done a lot of reflecting, and I realize how toxic I've been, not only to you, but to everyone around me. I don't expect you to forgive me, but maybe someday we can start over." Reading her remarks, I felt a glimpse of something I couldn't quite place, perhaps relief, or maybe optimism. But, overall, I felt cautious. Melanie's past behavior had taught me not to take her comments at their value. A single letter, no matter how passionate, was insufficient to repair the damage she had done. I showed Zach the letter that evening, and we discussed it during supper. "Do you believe she means it?" I asked. He thought for a moment. "Maybe. But even if she does, you don't have to accept her back into your life." "I know," I replied. "I just don't want to make the wrong decision. If she is serious, perhaps I should give her a chance." "Giving her a chance doesn't mean jumping back into the relationship as if nothing happened," Zach told me. "You can take it slow, set boundaries, protect yourself." He was correct, of course. If I was going to look into the prospect of restoring a relationship with Melanie, it had to be on my terms. For the following 2 weeks, I tucked the letter away in a drawer, reviewing it sometimes but without answering. I was not prepared, and I did not want to rush into anything. Meanwhile, my parents continued to work on repairing our relationship. They called on a frequent basis, not to guilt or pressure me, but to simply check in. It was a minor but significant difference, and I appreciated it more than I let on. Melanie had recently begun visiting a therapist, according to my mother. "I think she's really trying to change," she told me. "She's been talking about all the things she wants to do differently, how she wants to make amends." "That's good," I remarked warily. "But I'm still not ready." "I understand," Mom murmured, and for once, she appeared to mean it. Months passed, and I began to experience a feeling of closure, not because I had forgiven Melanie or repaired our relationship, but because I was finally enjoying life on my own terms. I was doing well in my career, my relationship with Zach was better than ever, and I had surrounded myself with people who genuinely cared about me. My connection with my parents was gradually improving, and while not ideal, it was a step in the right way. I eventually decided to write Melanie back. My letter was brief and to the point. I thanked her for her apology and acknowledged her efforts, but I made it clear that I required time and distance. "If we're ever going to rebuild our relationship," I declared, "it has to be on new terms. Terms that respect my boundaries and my well-being." I had no idea how she would react, and honestly, I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for her approval or attempting to please her. I was living for myself, which felt liberated. In the end, I recognized that forgiveness isn't about condoning someone's behavior or pretending the damage never occurred. It's about releasing yourself from the weight of that pain and choosing to move forward in a way that preserves your serenity, which is exactly what I plan to do. Life has a tendency of shocking you when you're least expecting it. After years of struggling with my own issues, dealing with family dysfunction, and questioning my worth, I suddenly found myself in a position where everything was fitting into place. Not because life had suddenly become flawless, but because I had stopped striving to meet everyone else's expectations. Professionally, my graphic design career was flourishing. Over the years, I developed a strong portfolio and received praise for my work. The true turning point came when I entered an industry competition with a campaign I produced for a sustainable fashion firm. I had thrown my heart and energy into that project, creating a visual identity that reflected the brand's essence while also pushing the boundaries of what was considered traditional design. When I received an email alerting me that I had won the coveted International Design Excellence Award, I couldn't believe it. At first, I assumed it was an error. I must have read the email a dozen times before it sank in. Winning that prize was more than just a recognition of my abilities. It reminded me that I could achieve greatness on my own terms. The ceremony was held in New York City, and Zach insisted on accompanying me. "This is your moment," he stated proudly. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The event was a whirlwind. I strolled into the large ballroom, feeling both nervous and delighted, surrounded by some of the most prominent personalities in the design industry. When my name was called and I walked up to the stage to receive the prize, the cheering was thunderous. I delivered a brief statement thanking those who had helped me along the way and dedicated the award to the mentors who had pushed me to pursue my goal. Following the ceremony, Numerous industry executives approached me, including Isabelle Marchand, creative director of a large advertising agency. She said my art was refreshing and bold, and she wanted to collaborate on a new project. That conversation marked the start of a professional connection that would lead to innumerable opportunities for me in the years ahead. Winning the award also spurred me to launch an initiative I had been planning for years. A mentorship program for budding designers. I termed it Creative Futures. The purpose was straightforward: to give information, guidance, and chances for budding designers who didn't have typical entry points into the business. Setting up the application was no easy task. I collaborated with local design schools and industry professionals to secure money through a variety of grants and sponsorships. Zach, my ever-supportive boyfriend, offered to help with the business side of things, connecting me with potential sponsors through his own network. By the time the program began, we had a roster of excellent mentors and a group of bright, hungry students ready to make an impact on the world. The first year of the program was a huge success. One of our mentees, a young woman named Tasha, went on to secure an internship at a renowned design firm, and several others earned scholarships to further their education. Seeing their progress and excitement reminded me why I fell in love with design in the first place. While I was busy developing Creative Futures, Zach was making waves in his own career. His technology company had developed from a modest, scrappy startup to an industry leader. After years of steady growth, Zach decided to expand internationally, establishing offices in London, Tokyo, Sydney, and Berlin. The expansion was a massive undertaking. Zach spent months traveling between locations, engaging with local teams and supervising the establishment of each new office. It was difficult work, but he relished the challenge. "I've always wanted to take this company global," he told me one night during dinner. "And now it's actually occurring. It feels surreal." Despite his tight schedule, Zach always found time for us. Whether it was setting aside an hour for a peaceful supper at home or surprising me with a weekend getaway, he never let work come between us. His ability to strike a balance between ambition and love was one of many reasons I respected him. As our professions progressed, we began to consider what we wanted our lives to be like in the years ahead. We both enjoyed the vitality of the city, but we also desired a retreat, somewhere we could unwind and recharge away from the hustle and bustle. That is how we ended up purchasing the lake cottage. Originally, Zach came up with the idea. He had been looking through real estate ads one evening when he came upon the property, a large mansion on the banks of Lake Tahoe. The house itself was spectacular, with floor-to-ceiling windows providing breathtaking views of the sea, a large terrace ideal for holding events, and a private dock for boating and kayaking. "Take a look at this," Zach replied, sliding his laptop across the table. "I think we should go see it." I scrolled through the photographs, my heart skipping a beat. "It's beautiful," I said. "Do we really need a facility like this?" "It's not about need," Zach said with a smile. "It's about creating an environment in which we can unwind and enjoy life. We've worked hard, Lindsay. I believe we deserve this." A few weeks later, we flew to Tahoe to tour the property. The instant we stepped inside, I knew it was the one. The house felt like a dream come true, luxurious but intimate, with every detail carefully planned. By the time we departed, we'd made an offer. Having the lake house felt like the pinnacle of everything we'd worked toward. We spent our weekends there, having friends for barbecues on the deck, taking long walks down the beach, and relaxing by the fire pit beneath the stars. It became our haven, a spot where we could unwind from the stresses of our hectic lives and simply enjoy each other's company. Looking back on everything we'd done, I couldn't help but be grateful, not only for our achievement, but also for the path that had led us here. The difficulties we had encountered, the lessons we had learned, and the love that sustained us through it all. I knew there were more chapters to our narrative to be written, but for now, I was pleased. Life was not ideal, but it was ours, which was more than enough.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.
Now to the next story. 9. Am I the asshole for breaking off my engagement with my fiancé after he made inappropriate and unsettling comments about my 14-year-old sister? I, 20 female, am in a tough situation, and I'm not sure if I'm overreacting, so I need some outside perspectives. I've been with my fiancé, Charles, 35 male, for about 2 years, and everything seemed fine until recently. A few weeks ago, my 14-year-old sister Amy came to stay with us for just a few days while our parents were out of town. During her stay, I started noticing some really unsettling things. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but Charles started making comments that made me feel incredibly uncomfortable. He would call her so hot, and would say things like, "You're going to turn heads when you're older," And, "You've got such a body on you already." The worst part was when he said, "I'd be jealous if I were your boyfriend. Every guy will be looking at you soon." I tried to ignore it at first, but it kept happening, and I began to feel sick to my stomach. Then, one evening, I overheard him telling a friend on the phone, "Amy's got that look now. It's like she's starting to bloom." It was honestly one of the creepiest things I've ever heard. I felt like I was losing my mind, and I just knew I couldn't stay in that relationship anymore. I confronted him about his behavior, and he immediately got defensive. He denied it and said I was being paranoid, and that I should trust him. He insisted that he was just being nice, and that I was overreacting. I didn't care. I packed my things, broke off the engagement, and moved back in with my parents. Now, my friends and some family members are telling me I overreacted. They say I should have talked it out with him first, but I don't see how that would have changed anything. So, am I the asshole for breaking up with my fiancé because of his creepy comments toward my little sister? Now to the next story 10. My dog saved my life when a stalker broke into my house. My sister-in-law now refuses to let him near my niece, claiming he's dangerous as he's snapped. This is kind of a complicated story, but I'll just get into it. I used to be in this controlling, kind of abusive relationship. When I finally broke it off a year ago, my ex started showing up, trying to get me to take him back. Eventually, it developed into full-on stalking. He would show up at my work, and took to just waiting outside of it after he was banned, leave notes on my car when I was at the grocery store, leave all kinds of flowers outside my house, and then stick angry notes on my door after he saw me throw them in the trash, wrote me all kinds of weird, obsessive emails and letters. I've had to change my phone number 3 times. The behavior escalated over time and got scarier, more threatening. In one instance, he started a small fire in my driveway, but the police couldn't get enough evidence connecting him to it. It was after that instance that I put cameras in my yard. I previously only had them pointing at my doors. I was horrified to learn that the police couldn't do shit about any of this until my stalker actually was caught doing something illegal, like breaking into my house. At which point, I might already be dead. I decided I wasn't spending the rest of my life waiting for the other shoe to drop, so I got a handgun and a concealed carry permit, took some self-defense courses, and started doing strength training. I also looked into getting an attack dog, but after all the money I'd sunk into my other methods of protection, they were prohibitively expensive. So I went to my local animal shelter and got the scariest, meanest-looking dog I could find. This is where Thor comes in. He's a 100-pound American bulldog, looks like he'd rip your throat out on sight, but is basically a gigantic teddy bear. He loves every person he's ever met, is incredibly sweet and gentle with my 4-year-old niece, enjoys other animals, and even loves the mailman. I just kind of accepted that he probably wouldn't do anything to protect me from my stalker, but it didn't matter that much because having such a huge dog made me so much more confident. I brought Thor everywhere I could, and was working on getting him trained enough to be an emotional support animal, so I could bring him inside places with me. I absolutely would not do this until he was trained well enough to not disrupt a regular service dog. Last month, I woke up in the middle of the night to Thor whining. I was groggy and thought he had to go to the bathroom, so I got out of bed and opened the door. At that point, my house alarm went off, and pretty soon after that, I was face to face with my stalker. I started screaming and went to run for my gun. Before I could do anything though, Thor ran across the room in full attack mode. The memory is really blurry for me, but there was blood all over my living room, and I remember my stalker was eventually able to escape, at which point Thor chased him outside and then came back to me. When the police showed up, they said Thor was a hero who'd probably saved my life. I don't want to list what they found in my stalker's car after they caught him, and I'm shaking a little as I type this, but I'm sure he was going to bring me somewhere and kill me. It looks like he's going to prison for a long time though, so my nightmare is over. Pretty much everyone in my life thinks Thor is a hero, except my sister-in-law. She and my brother have a 4-year-old, the one I mentioned above, and she says she doesn't want Thor around her, the child, anymore. She says since Thor has snapped in the past, he could do it again, so he's not safe to have around kids. We used to see each other a few times a week before she decided Thor was dangerous. The way she words this makes me really angry because Thor didn't snap. He saw a stranger break into his home, heard his owner scream in terror, and reacted to defend me, himself, and his house. Nothing about that screams dangerous around children, to me, unless my niece is also going to break into my house and threaten me. This is also a very emotional issue for me because Thor isn't just a dog to me. He's my safe place, my hero, the one who protected me and kept me safe when no one else could. I've also gotten increasingly anxious since this happened, and I can't go anywhere without Thor. I barely leave my house, pay to pick up my groceries from the store instead of going in because I know Thor isn't allowed inside, and all my friends know that if Thor isn't welcome in their house, I'm not coming either, although they're perfectly welcome to come hang out at my house instead. I am really going through it, and am working with a therapist to overcome this. Luckily my office is still fully remote, but I need to be able to go back to work once we're in person again. But I really need my brother and sister-in-law's support. I think my sister-in-law thinks I'm just pouting, and that's why I won't just leave the dog home and come over without him. I don't know how to explain to them that the fear hasn't stopped just because my stalker is in jail. It's actually a lot worse than it was before. I've already suggested they come over and I create Thor, but that wasn't good enough for her. What can I do to make her understand the situation better? Claudia, my dog took down my stalker after he broke into my house. Now I have severe anxiety and am too afraid to be without him, but my sister-in-law thinks he's unsafe around my 4-year-old niece. I don't know how to make them understand that I really am too afraid to go anywhere without him and not just trying to win an argument. Comments. Comment 1. Most of the people that replied have given you excellent advice. Mine is to get you to see that you won. As I read your post, I realized that you have no idea how smart and strong you are. You were threatened and took action. You got a gun, permit, training, cameras, alarm system, a dog, and all the things that I usually have to talk people into. For years I provided a service to victims of stalkers. I would first inform them of their legal rights, tell them their options, help them with filing reports, do a deep background on the stalker, inspect the home for security, advise then on a proper alarm system and changes, find a contractor, help them select a handgun and train them what to do at home, at work, on the street, help find a dog, therapist, and many other things. Over the years, I developed a thorough understanding of the mind of stalkers and how to deal with them. I know how helpless you feel when the law says you have to be beaten or killed before they can do anything. Today, most major cities have a support group for people that are harassed by stalkers. Sometimes, I would even have a discussion with the stalker, but that only worked 10% of the time. Stalkers know the law, aren't afraid of much, and are driven by things most people don't understand. I could list the many things we did, including staking out the house and catching them. I was licensed and permitted in everything. I only share this background so that you know that I have more experience at this than most people. The reason I'm replying to your post is to tell you that you did things on your own, that I had to push clients to do, because they either were paralyzed with fear, lived in denial, or were passive and had to be pushed into protecting themselves. Some even wanted to move away. Never run from a stalker, and you didn't. In 15 years I never had one client that took the initiative like you have. You did almost everything right, and you should be proud of your efforts and know that you are strong enough to deal with this and anything else life throws at you. You won. Don't let this piece of trash know that he caused you pain. These sick people get pleasure from your fear. So as you go forward, don't let your sister-in-law get to you. She has no idea what you went through, and her fear of your dog is baseless. You are really lucky and have one heck of a dog. He saved your life and deserves a great partner like you. Please don't underestimate yourself. I never had one client as strong and smart as you. You should be talking to victims and sharing your story of courage and survival. You would provide a service to victims that think no one understands their constant fear. If you did that, you would be giving yourself therapy. Therapy isn't much more than sharing your fears with someone that understands, and you truly do. Comment 2. Because there have been plenty of helpful comments already regarding what to do with Thor, great name, and your sister-in-law, I just want to make sure you're also taking care of yourself. What you've been through is horribly traumatic that few people in the world have experienced. I know you've gone to great lengths to protect yourself with classes and the like, but now that the imminent physical threat is taken care of, it's time to take off the emotional scars your stalker has inflicted on you. Please seek out some trauma therapy. You deserve to be able to live without the constant cloud of fear hanging over you. Please seek professional therapy. You'll thank yourself so much for being kind enough to take care of your mental health. Best of luck to you and lots of pets for your perfect doggy. Reply 2, echoing this. OP. Depending on where you live, you may be eligible for trauma therapy paid by the county in which the judicial process occurred. Do they have a victim advocate's office? If not, I recommend looking up the National Association of Crime Victims Compensation Boards, if in U.S. Link. http watch www.danacvc.org. They can help you figure out what you are eligible for as a victim. I can tell you from experience as a victim of a crime that this service has been invaluable and allowed me to receive free weekly trauma therapy for almost a year now. Virtual since COVID. It also might help you find ways to talk to your brother and sister-in-law. Your support system is more important than ever, But sometimes people truly don't understand the brain alteration a trauma can cause, and you might not have the ability to describe it in a way they can understand right now. A therapist can help coach you on how to talk to them so that you can hopefully have time with your family and niece, and your dog. Also, and I hate to add this depressing advice, but talk to the victim advocate or sign up for the victim notification via the prison system so you aren't taken unawares by an early sentencing release. In the case I'm a victim in, the perp was sentenced to 6 years but will probably be out in less than 3. Restraining orders do not always roll over from before, so make sure you have a new one set in place if when this sociopath gets out on parole. So thankful Thor was there to keep you alive. Best wishes on healing. Comment 3. I'm really sorry that this all happened to you. I'm glad that both you and your pup are all right. You might want to look into a box muzzle. I'm not recommending it because Thor did anything wrong, but it might make the other person feel more comfortable. It's a muzzle that can be worn comfortably. Your pup can open its mouth, have his tongue hang out, whatever. I got one when introducing my 100-pound dog to a 2-pound kitten. It's a safety blanket. You can have them together without any fear. That said, it hurts to get hit with the cage. My lovely dumb dog got excited while wearing it, tried to lick me, and ran into my face with it on. I wish you luck with everything. Edit. Thank you to whoever awarded me the silver. That was really kind of you. I had a large aggressive breed of dog that was super friendly and loving. He crossed over the Rainbow Bridge last year. I understand the struggle of having an intimidating dog and the judgments that can go along with it. I especially want aggressive breeds to get all the love and attention they deserve. OP sounds like they're doing a fantastic job. No one should have to pick between a person and partner wanting what is best for their child or their amazing dog, especially one that saved their life. Reply 3. This is probably the best advice. As OP feels absolutely safe with the dog, the parents of the 4-year-old are absolutely responsible for ensuring their child's safety. I like this to keep young children out of the kitchen when cooking things on the stove. A pot of spaghetti is not evil, it's not malicious, and it's absolutely safe when used properly. But if a kid pulls it over on themselves, it's going to be tragic. I look at a dog which is capable of sending a full-grown man to the hospital to be as dangerous as that pot of spaghetti. A few ounces of prevention and inconvenience is absolutely worth everyone's peace of mind. You can even get the dog to love the box muzzle too. Make it so that he gets to play a treat game when he puts it on, and before long that dog will literally be bringing the muzzle to you whenever he hears the brother's car pull up. Comment 4. If it weren't for Thor, your stalker probably wouldn't be carted off to prison. Thor helped provide DNA that pinpoints stalkers to the scene. Best move on your part. That's such great news, and I'm glad things will be better for you. Your sister-in-law is being ridiculous. A home invasion is something a dog notices. That is why he attacked. You were scared and running, and the dog knew this strange guy was the problem, so he took care of it. Your sister doesn't understand dogs and I think is speaking from ignorance. I'm sorry this has happened to you, but parents will be parents. I'd just keep them separate from here on out to keep the peace. Reply 4. Thor sounds very smart and simply amazing. On one hand, I understand the concern of a child around any dog, but Thor didn't snap. He did what OP had hoped he would do and defended his mama from a man who broke into her house. I don't understand why keeping him created is unacceptable to her. They need to have a talk because sister-in-law seems to think OP is pouting, but she just went through severe trauma and relies on him for her anxiety. OP should also get counseling for PTSD though, because realistically she can't bring him with her everywhere for the rest of her life unfortunately. Some businesses don't allow emotional support animals, particularly a large bully breed. Now to the next story. 11. My husband has secretly fathered his best friend's children. Now I'm terrified when his eldest son showed romantic interest in my daughter. All names are fake. This began as a dark, intrusive thought that I could never shake off, and over the years it has bloomed into a poison flower that infects my entire psyche. I'm a 42-year-old woman. My husband Luke is 43, and so is Amy. I met Luke in college, but he's known Amy since they were about 7. They did everything together and understood each other implicitly. They were best friends. They've always insisted that they are surrogate siblings to each other. Naturally, I, as a new girlfriend, felt a little threatened by Amy and her closeness to Luke, but they both reassured me I had nothing to worry about. That their bond was not romantic and had never been sexual. That Amy really was just the sister that Luke never had. I believed them, and it didn't take long for me to forget any and all insecurity I had about Amy. She became my friend too. She officiated our wedding. Luke and I have built a wonderful life together, and we always had a strong relationship. After we got married and moved in together, we still saw a lot of Amy, and I was fine with that. I've spent many nights in the town trying to help Amy find a man, as she has always lamented how she is unlucky in love. Luke and I started to have children after we were married, and, at around the same point, so did Amy. For further context, my children are Sophie, 15, Owen, 12, Louise, 10, and Carter, 6. Amy's children are Tom, 17, Kaylee, 14, and twins Adam and Jenna, 9. Now, Amy was not in a relationship at this point. She was not married. As far as I knew, she was dating, but not consistently. As Luke and I had more kids and our family grew, periodically Amy would find herself pregnant as well. It happened a few times, and Luke and I never knew anything about the fathers in question. I kind of assumed that maybe Amy was sleeping around and not keeping in contact with her one-night stands. Luke agreed this was probably the answer. While I did ask each time if Amy knew of paternity, she always said no, and she didn't seem that worried about the idea of raising kids on her own, so I didn't pester her. Of course, she had us to support her, so there was that. While Amy never asked for any help, of course Luke was never going to let his best friend struggle to stay afloat when she had children to raise. Financially, we are very fortunate and privileged. I have a job that pays handsomely, and Luke also had wealthy parents who already knew and loved Amy, so they were happy to provide for her. My in-laws defy all stereotypes. They are the kindest and gentlest people. So we were able to support Amy. To get her somewhere to stay with her kids. People might be tempted to call her a leech, but I never saw it that way. None of us did. She needed help and we could provide it. I also know people are going to criticize her for her lack of responsibility and question why she never used more reliable birth control. Honestly, that is a long story that I don't want to get into because even I don't fully understand her reasoning, but it was quite important to her that she never be on birth control and that whatever came of that choice, she would accept. It wasn't religiously motivated, I know that, but it was that degree of significance to Amy. She really did not want to take birth control. She's explained it to me more than once, but I'm still not clear on why. Of course, Amy being Luke's best friend since they were kids, it's not unreasonable that sometimes they hang out together while I'm not there. Hey, that's fine. Sometimes I hang out with Amy one-on-one as well, though Luke does it more. She was his friend first. This included him going over to where she was staying and at times, sleeping over there. Was I a fool to trust him and believe nothing was going on? Perhaps. But for years, they presented as being buddies? Like siblings. I didn't pick up on any vibes between them, not ever. As one can expect, our children were brought up together. Not in the same house, our home is decently sized, but even we don't have the room for 8 kids. But we made sure Amy's children met ours from a young age, and they always got along, and strong bonds of friendship have formed over the years, which is good. Especially if I'm right, and they share blood. I've been dawdling getting to the main point. Yes. I have come to suspect that Luke fathered at least one of Amy's kids, if not all of them. Frankly, I do suspect they are all his. I would never have believed my husband to be capable of such a thing, and he's given me no indication that he is the unfaithful sort. But he does spend a lot of time with Amy, and I have to confess I cannot remember seeing her with any real boyfriend over the years. She would talk to men at bars and parties, I would try to be her wingman, and so on. But nothing ever seemed to really happen, so when she got pregnant the first time, I was curious. When it happened again and again, I began to wonder if she had some sort of secret fella who she didn't want us to know about for whatever reason. But I couldn't think of any reason why she would hide him, especially from her children. After Carter, our youngest, was born, Luke and I agreed that the time had come for him to have a vasectomy. Amy's twins had come just a couple of years prior. Of course, after the procedure, Luke and I continued to make love, but I no longer had to think about pregnancy. Meanwhile, Amy never got pregnant again, after the twins. Is it a coincidence that Luke had a vasectomy and then both of us stopped getting pregnant? I don't know. But Luke would still visit her, and he wasn't just going to see her, but checking up on her children as well. In general, I should have paid more attention to it sooner, but Luke has always acted like a father to them, especially as they've gotten older. He's the father they never had. He doesn't neglect me, or our children, not one bit. He's doing double duty. On its own, the idea that he is a surrogate father to Amy's fatherless children isn't inherently suspicious. One could call it noble. But it combines with a lot of other little things. There is appearance as well. I won't go into specifics of hair color, eye color, or unique physical traits, because I'd rather limit the identifying factors of the people involved and keep this whole thing as vague as possible. But suffice it to say, Amy's children, they certainly look like they could be Luke's. Kaylee has a very unusual allergy that Luke also has. The twins look very much like him, Adam in particular. The older Tom has gotten, the more of Luke I can see in his face and personality. While their race doesn't matter, the reality is that Luke is a different race than Amy, and Amy's children look pretty biracial. I could easily believe their father is the same race as Luke. Doesn't mean Luke has to be the father, but it sure seems like it. I have never voiced my anxieties to either Amy or Luke. I don't want to be the bad guy, and, guilty or innocent, I already know they would flatly deny my accusations and be hurt by them. Imagine if that drama reached the ears of my kids, or Amy's kids. Either way, Luke continues to spend time with Amy and her children, just as her children spend time with mine. I have hinted to Luke that I feel needy for more attention and wish he wouldn't give as much to Amy. But he either missed my cues or pretended that he missed them. I don't want to push this idea that he's favoring her, because it's not even really true. He's never neglected me for her. I can't shake the feeling that Luke and Amy have been intimate before, likely numerous times. So far as I know, Amy never really wanted to be a mother either. She wasn't opposed to it, and when each of her children came into the world she instantly fell in love with them, but motherhood was never really a major part of her life plan or identity. In the grand scheme of things, when we would talk about the future, she would sometimes mention a husband and children, but it never seemed like something she had her heart particularly set on. So, I don't think this is a case of Luke just giving Amy children. I doubt that was the motive for the infidelity. That would have been a side effect. I've been letting this go and turning a blind eye for years. It was a dark thought in the back of my mind after Kaylee's allergy was discovered, but I dismissed it. Got worse after the twins were born. I dismissed it. Then, when Amy stopped having babies, I wanted to feel reassured by that. But, Luke had gotten a vasectomy, so if anything, that made my anxiety worse. There have been nights that I wished the twins were younger, that they had come along after Luke's procedure. It's been twisting me into knots for a long time, but I don't want to be the one who rips our family apart, especially since, technically, I could be wrong. Except now I'm very afraid, because in the last few months we've had a new development in our kids' social circle. Tom, Amy's eldest, asked Sophie out. Sophie? My eldest. She's really blossomed over these last few years and become quite the outspoken beauty, so I'm not shocked to see she's getting male attention, but Tom asking her out had me thrown. Sophie said no, but only because I'm quite protective when it comes to her exploring dating, and she knew she'd have to ask me first. I could tell she was flattered and intrigued by his interest and wanted to say yes. She approached me to talk to me about it. Bless my girl, she did everything right. I think she expected I would see things her way and agree that she could date Tom. Much to her surprise, I very firmly said no. That caused a bit of conflict. She didn't even want to date him that badly, she just couldn't understand why she wasn't allowed to. And I couldn't explain it to her. All I could come up with was, he's too old for you, which he is, but it's not really about that. When Amy and Luke heard, I was so very curious to see what their reactions would be. If either of them had agreed with Sophie and tried to convince me that the two of them should be allowed to date, I think I would have been relieved and taken that as proof that I was wrong about something going on between them. Wrong about who fathered Amy's children. But, the ambiguity continued. They took my side. Both of them put their foot down, though not as fiercely as I did. Luke agreed with me, but he also worried that trying to forbid such a romance would only make Sophie want it more. He's probably right about that. Amy seemed more apathetic to the idea. She didn't want Tom to date Sophie either, and she backed me up. But I don't know, she just wasn't taking it as seriously. She seemed to think it was a fleeting crush. Well, it wasn't. In the months following those conversations, Tom would spend more and more time with Sophie. They would be alone, or with other friends, any time they possibly could. It's become abundantly clear that Tom is crazy about Sophie and wants to be with her. And he definitely wants to be physical. I've been watching them like a hawk and noticed his eye wandering many times. And while I'm doing everything I can to kill this budding romance in the crib, I also am feeling somewhat powerless. Sophie hasn't outwardly defied me, she's still just hanging out with Tom as friends. So forcing them to stop spending time together would be unreasonable, and probably encourage more sneaking around. But I'm so afraid that they're already doing that. My nightmare is that they're secretly dating, and doing God knows what when no one is looking. I've observed Tom being rather handsy with Sophie, and she presents no objection whatsoever. And I just don't know what to say. I had considered trying to convince Sophie that Tom is like her brother, but if she doesn't see him that way, I don't really have the power to rewrite their emotional dynamic or the history of their friendship. I always saw Amy and her children as being like family, but my kids might see Amy's kids more as best friends. The problem is, of course, that if my husband has indeed been carrying on an affair over the years and I'm right about the paternity of Amy's children, then Tom and Sophie cannot be anything more than friends under any circumstances, end of discussion. It can never happen, I feel powerless to stop it, though. Luke has apparently talked to Tom about this, as has Amy, but he is unrelenting and he won't give up on Sophie. I think she enjoys that attention and devotion. Tom has also confronted me and asked why I'm so against this when I know him very well and I know he would be good to Sophie. I didn't know what to say other than to fall back on her being too young for him. But that won't work forever. If, God forbid, they're still attracted to each other in a few years, then they'll pursue this with abandon, and once they're legal adults, there's nothing I can do about it. Amy and Luke agree with me that Tom cannot date Sophie, but that's all they've really done. They feel just as powerless as me to prevent teen love. It genuinely feels sometimes like they've just given up and will bury their heads in the sand about this. Just do nothing and hope the feelings pass as Tom and Sophie get older. Which, yeah, they're in high school. It's unlikely Tom will be in love with Sophie forever. But my fear is that she'll let him do something intimate with her before that time comes, something neither of them can take back. I am this close to opening a door I cannot close, this close to screaming at Luke that all this wouldn't be happening if he hadn't cheated on me these many years. If he hadn't been all but raising a second family with his surrogate sister behind my back. Now Luke's son wants to fuck our daughter, his actual sister, because as far as he knows, she's just his childhood friend. And it's all Luke and Amy's fault for what they've done. If I speak up, everything gets blown to hell. On the off chance that I am wrong, I'm a horrible monster who accused the love of my life and one of my closest friends of doing something horrible. If I'm right, it still tears our entire structure apart. The family and social unit we've become over the last several years is gone, and everyone will be stressed and upset even if Luke and I don't divorce. If I do nothing, Sophie's eventually going to sleep with Tom and be his girlfriend. And I'm low-key terrified it will happen sooner than later, or worse, that it's already happened under my nose. I hope to hell this relationship fades as they mature, but what if it doesn't? What if they wind up being together for years? What if they marry, want to get pregnant someday? And if I tell Sophie the truth about Amy's kids, then everyone else finds out too, and that's going to ruin so many lives. It would shatter my kids' perception of their father, and their Aunt Amy. Luke is Owen's hero. I don't even want to think about how much this would hurt him. And what about Amy's children? They are innocent. They didn't ask for this. They don't control where they came from, and I don't want to hurt them. Admittedly, I'm not happy with Tom at the moment. A week ago I saw him put his hand on Sophie's butt and I wanted to knock his teeth out. But even he doesn't deserve to be burdened by the knowledge that it's his half-sister he's been fantasizing about. It's all so fucked up and I don't know what to do. I've been looking the other way and letting my husband and his best friend insult me for such a long time now. I thought I could live with it. But this business with Tom and Sophie has me distressed. Judgment, NTA. Update 1. First of all, wow. I did not expect my post to get as much traction as it did. I was half worried that someone in my family or social circle might find it, especially when someone alerted me that the post had been shared to Facebook. But, as far as I can tell, no one in my family has seen it. I want to thank all of the kind commenters who wished me well. To those who were more frustrated with my indecision, I get it. But I was operating with an uncertain situation and the stakes were incredibly high. I feel like no matter what choice I made, something could and likely would go wrong. I've spent the last 5 years imagining different scenarios based on different ways I could go about this if I ever decided to act on it. To everyone who was clamoring for an update, I have one for you. I previously said that I was going to do a secret DNA test, that I had decided on that course of action. In the end, I couldn't go through with it, and now I am regretting that, because the window to do so is essentially closed. I just felt like it would be out of line for me to do that to another person's child behind their back. Ethically, it was dicey. I've since consulted with my lawyer as many commenters suggested, and she advised me against doing so, because no matter what the results were, it would make me look bad in a potential divorce proceeding. But I really wish I had done it anyway, and just not told anyone. Because I really, badly need to know, and I still don't know for sure. Likewise, I wanted to tell Sophie in confidence, but the more I thought about it, even that seemed over the line. Like I had no right to plant such ideas in her mind about her father without even talking to him first. So, what I ended up doing was confronting Luke and Amy. Many comments suggested this as well. I finally told both of them that we needed to have a serious talk. It felt counterproductive to approach just one of them, because I figured they would tell the other about what happened in their own words before I could prepare my own. I wanted them both to hear what I had to say. Once all the kids were at school, I laid down all of my suspicions and the reasons. I made it clear how much I love both of them, but a combination of clues had led me to notice the similarities between Luke and Amy's children, and I didn't even list all of them in the original post. For example, Luke has been a sleepwalker in the past. So have Sophie, Tom, and Adam. I said over and over how much they meant to me and how I didn't want to believe it, but the thought had crept into my mind in the past. How I had dismissed it before. But now, with Tom and Sophie having crushes on each other, it became necessary to pose the question. So I asked if they had ever crossed the line, if Luke had ever been unfaithful, if there was even the slightest possibility that any of Amy's children were his. I was just trying not to cry. Well, they reacted exactly as I would have expected. Their responses were perfect and so very well rehearsed. I genuinely can't tell if it was honest emotion or powerful gaslighting. Amy was more upset than Luke, or at least more outwardly upset. She was angry, offended at the accusation. Luke just seemed heartbroken by it. Maybe they were just acting, but I don't know. Somehow, they had reasonable responses to all of the points I brought up. They asked questions I didn't know how to answer. I had never objected to them having alone time before. Why did it suddenly bother me now? Do Amy's children really resemble Luke that much, or are things like hair color pretty basic traits to have in common? The whole family had always treated Amy and her kids as part of our unit, and I had previously commended Luke for stepping up and being a father to Amy's kids since they didn't have one. Why was I now saying it was a bad thing? What exactly did I want them to do? How could I think such a thing about them? Why had I waited so long to say something? Luke was more understanding than Amy. He respected my feelings, or at least he acted like he did. Amy appeared to feel more betrayed by what I said. I ended up apologizing several times even though I'm not sure I did anything wrong. Luke also apologized for anything he'd done, to indicate he was unfaithful. I asked Amy more pointedly that, if not Luke, who had fathered her children? She snapped back that it was none of my business, and I could tell she was in no mood to get personal or vulnerable with me after my accusations. I'm not proud to say that I lost my temper, and said that after everything we had done for her and her children, such information was not a lot to ask and perhaps she owed it to us. I regretted the words as soon as I said them, but Amy shouted back that I had never done anything for her, that it was Luke and his parents who had kept her afloat all these years, not me. She went on a longer tirade about how I had always acted superior to her, which I don't believe I did, though it's possible that I gave off that vibe unintentionally. Luke did his best to calm her down, but the room was still fraught with tension. I don't know Reddit, I just don't know. It's driving me to the edge of madness. There is a way to be certain, of course. Not certain of my husband's fidelity, but of the paternity of Amy's children. So I asked Luke, for my own peace of mind, for the sake of our daughter, and for our family unit, if he could please get a DNA test done, a paternity test. I went on to say that I knew he disliked and distrusted such things, but that I really needed this. I could see the pain in Luke's eyes. Maybe it was an act, but he did seem genuinely hurt that I was asking for this, that him giving me his word that he had always been faithful was not enough for me. But he very reluctantly agreed to participate in a DNA test. Unfortunately, Amy did not, and that's where we hit a roadblock. I was afraid of this. But Amy was infuriated at the whole concept and told me in no uncertain terms that I would not be getting samples of her children's DNA and basically told me to fuck off for asking, several times in several variations. I pressed Luke, and honestly he was a bit useless but probably right. He tried to convince Amy but she wouldn't hear of it, and he kind of shrugged to me when I pushed him for further support. Because he can't force her to get the test done, if she refuses, that's really a dead end. Trust me, it is. I looked into this quite a bit and consulted with my lawyer. The problem is, Luke could, in theory, petition the court to demand a paternity test for Tom and the others. The issue is that, to do this, he'd essentially be claiming he slept with Amy and he believes her children to be his. That would be the version of events he'd be maintaining. But Luke has staunchly insisted that nothing ever happened with Amy. That he never cheated on me. Whether or not he's being honest about this is another story, but he'd essentially have to go on record and make a claim that he isn't prepared to make. He is quite certain the children aren't his and he has no intention of fighting for custody of them. So no judge is going to compel Amy to submit samples of her children's DNA. Tom is also old enough that his consent would be a factor. If both he and Amy refuse to participate in the test, it's unlikely that Luke would have a case. He'd have to target one of Amy's younger children, like say, one of the twins. But he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to take his best friend to court to prove something that, in his words, he already knows isn't true. Luke is asking me to please just let this go, and trust him, because pursuing this will fracture everything. And according to my lawyer, it's not realistic anyway. For Luke to establish paternity, he would need to admit to an affair in the first place, and he's not doing that. And if he did, that would pretty much be all the proof I needed to be certain, even if I'd need more in a court case. I pestered him further about Tom and Sophie. Insisted that I didn't want them dating. Luke agreed, and apparently Amy still agrees. Luke plans to have a talk with Tom and activate protective Papa Bear mode. Among other things, he's going to remind Tom that in a couple of months when he turns 18, him being intimate with Sophie will literally be a crime. I wouldn't actually press charges against him as I know he'd never do anything against Sophie's will, but I'm not above implying the threat. Thankfully, Luke isn't either. I did ask him if he'd be open to potentially swiping a sample of Tom's DNA to do a private paternity test, but he was very hesitant about the idea. Like me, he viewed it as unethical. He also pointed out that if we were to do this and Amy found out, it would mean the end of our friendship with her, most likely. Things are, Luke believes, still in a salvageable state, where Amy and I could reconcile and become friends again, and I can see how much he wants this to happen. But, if I did a DNA test on Tom behind Amy's back and she found out, I think she would hit the roof and I wouldn't entirely blame her. Though I'd be very interested to see the results. Luke ended up going to see Amy and spending the night. I know all of you are cringing and throwing up your hands, and trust me, I wasn't happy about it. That was a very long conversation. But he was adamant that he needed to perform damage control. So they spent the night together. With Luke maintaining that nothing happened, I did not sleep a wink and I kept texting him for updates. So far as I can tell, Amy will cool off, but she needs a little time. Luke and I talked things over when he came back the next morning. It was an emotionally fulfilling conversation and we ended up agreeing to take the kids, our kids, not Amy's, to visit their grandparents for a few days. It was an impromptu visit but we've done it before and they were delighted to have us. I just really wanted our family to spend some time together away from Amy's side of the family, so to speak. I always love getting to see my in-laws. I'll refer to them as Jim, 75 million, and Kat, 67 degrees Fahrenheit. I know Reddit is famous for stories about the mill from hell, but in my life that couldn't be further from the truth. I feel safe with them. To the point that, when they took notice of how distant Luke and I were from each other, I finally relented and confessed my fears. I told them of my anxiety that Amy and Luke were having an affair, and that Amy's children might be his. Here's where things got a little bit interesting. When I told them what I was feeling, Kat just gave Jim this pointed look, and did a big, dramatic sigh. So it turns out, Kat has had similar misgivings to mine and genuinely suspected over the years that Luke and Amy were closer than they'd ever admit, that they had crossed the line in the past. Jim, on the other hand, simply refuses to even consider the idea. He has always insisted that Kat is seeing things that aren't there. He maintains that Luke and Amy are like siblings, and would never do such a thing. Kat thinks his stance on this is naive and that, even if she and Jim had taken Amy in and loved her like a daughter, that didn't mean Luke viewed her as a sister or that she viewed him as a brother. But Jim just continued to insist that this is what they are and had always been. I could tell that he and Kat have already had this conversation before, and they kept going in circles, with Kat getting exasperated. She pointed out that, surrogate siblings or not, Luke and Amy were not actually brother and sister, so nothing was stopping them from being physical together if they felt a mutual attraction. At that point, Jim just sighed and walked away from the conversation. So yes, Kat has privately wondered if Amy's children weren't fathered by Luke, which is part of why she has always treated them as her grandchildren. Which was never something that I minded, to be clear. I also don't mind that Kat never voiced these concerns to me. She had no proof, and she saw far less of Luke and Amy's closeness in our adult lives than I did. As for the kids? They're doing all right. I don't know what Amy told her children, but I think the general consensus, the official version of events, is that Amy and I had a fight and needed a break from each other. That's what Luke and I told our children, and when pressed for more information, Luke did defend me and shut down the questions, saying it wasn't their business. I don't know if Amy kept to that version of events, but my children and her children have each other's phone numbers and social media, so they've presumably still been in contact over the last 2 days. I think my kids would have kept Amy's kids in the loop on the updates, and if Amy had told them anything else significant, they would have relayed that information to my kids. After all, we know Sophie and Tom are very close. I did try and talk to Sophie about that more, but the timing was off, because Sophie rejected my counsel and interpreted my reinforced reluctance as being attributed to my fight with Amy. She maintained that she wasn't dating Tom. To what degree that's actually true, I don't know. But she was going to remain close friends with him, and while she isn't usually a disobedient child, she made it very clear that she was putting her foot down on this one, and, to be fair, I can't really justify trying to separate them or forbid them from being friends. They've known each other for years. Luke has my back on them not being allowed to date, but he wouldn't have my back on them not hanging out anymore. I wish I had a more definitive update. If anything significant happens in the next few days, I can let you guys know. I'm mostly just kicking myself for not having done the secret test, even for my own peace of mind, as now I feel like I'm locked out of the only way to get definitive proof one way or the other. Comments. Comment 1. They spent the night together. OP, come on. That's not acceptable. They're definitely a couple. Comment 2. Honestly, do you really think he's sleeping on the sofa? Why is he sleeping over there if there is nothing going on? You go to your friend's house and talk and then you go back home to your wife and kids. WTF? What about your kids? He doesn't give a shit about any of you. Time to have another chat with the lawyer, and you really need to get more angry about this. You are way too understanding. This woman has wrecked all your lives, and even your in-laws have been suspecting the same all along. Comment 3. Luke and Amy are a couple and OP is the side piece at this point. Update 3. I think my husband fathered his best friend's children, and now one of them is attracted to my daughter. 1 day later. I didn't expect to have another update so quickly, but after posting my first update I did a lot of thinking about my kids. I ultimately decided that whatever else happened, I needed to warn Sophie about the situation, and do so immediately. To hell with Luke and whatever that meant for him. To hell if that meant all of the kids learned of the situation. She needed to be aware of what she might be getting herself into. So I discreetly kept her out of school. We went back home, to our home, last night, and this morning, I dropped everyone off and saved Sophie for last, before driving right past her school and telling her that we needed to talk. Always a frightening thing for a teenager to hear from a parent, but I was quick to establish that she was not in trouble, but she needed to know the truth about why Amy and I were fighting, why her dating Tom was out of the question. I very gently explained that because of Luke's closeness to Amy and Tom's resemblance to him, I had come to suspect that perhaps Luke and Amy were intimate at some point over the years. If that was true, and there was any chance Tom's father was actually Luke, that would be a significant problem. Sophie was quiet during all of this, and even after I had stopped talking to let her respond, she paused for quite a while, before she finally said that we needed to get Tom and discuss this with him as well. I had no objections, so she texted him to meet with us. They're both skipping school today, but Sophie gets straight A's and this is extremely important, so I looked the other way. Tom came to meet us, and Sophie had me relay what I told her to him as well. I apologized to him for any indication I might have given that I didn't think he was good enough for my daughter, and to both of them for not telling the truth sooner. Tom and Sophie just gave each other this oddly knowing stare. And Reddit, that's when they blew my mind. Sophie spoke first, with Tom backing her up. They revealed to me that in fact, they had already known about Luke and Amy, or at least they had strongly suspected. Apparently Tom has overheard conversations that are questionable, as well as overhearing the sounds of sex from Amy's room, sounds he would just as soon forget, but all signs point to Amy's lover having been Luke. Tom had wondered for a very long time, and back in January, he finally voiced his fears to Sophie. She agreed with them. She could also see a strange sort of closeness between her father and his mother. They agreed that Luke was likely having an affair. They agreed that because of Kaylee's allergy, Luke might very well be her father. And if Kaylee was Luke's daughter, the rest of Tom's siblings could be Luke's as well. Tom could be Luke's kid himself. The math led them to the same places as me. So Sophie and Tom came up with a little plan. As it turns out, they are not in love. They never were. They're still just best friends. But they had the same instinct as me, that they didn't want to blow up our entire family and social unit without more direct evidence, which Tom has been working on acquiring. And though Sophie very badly wanted to tell me the truth, she was hesitant because she knew it would shatter me. She had no idea I was already suffering in silence. Sophie apologized for not voicing her suspicions sooner. Honestly, we both cried, and I made sure she understood that none of this was her fault, and that I loved her very much. So, the bottom line is, Sophie and Tom already know they could be half-siblings and aren't actually interested in being a couple. That was their idea for how to rock the boat. To force Luke and Amy to do something about the situation rather than just keep making a fool out of me. I also think it was Sophie's way of punishing them for their affair. Teenagers can be vindictive, so they concocted this idea that they wanted to date. Every flirtation I've witnessed, every inappropriate touch, all staged, apparently, and for the benefit of Luke, Amy, or both. This was supposed to make them sweat, and Tom expected they would jump out of their seats to forbid it from happening. When I was the one who did instead, that kind of threw the kids for a loop. They couldn't understand why I cared more than the actual cheaters. They began to suspect that maybe I knew. Tom confronting me that one time about why can't I date Sophie, was him trying to gauge if I knew or not. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised. Sophie and Tom have always been close friends and confided in each other. Maybe I should be a little more concerned at how sneaky they've been, but honestly, I'm just so relieved they're not dating. Sure, they could be lying to throw off the scent, I guess, but they apparently already knew that they're likely related. They didn't blink at all when I told them. We even had a bit of a laugh together when Tom mentioned how he had been a little offended that I was so against him dating my daughter before. I kind of jokingly asked him, "So you don't think she's gorgeous?" And Tom, bless his heart, shrugged it off. She is. But so is my English teacher, and I'm not asking her out either. Either way, the question now is, where to go from here? We have to figure that out. I will say that it is such a relief to have told Sophie, and I feel like an elephant has taken one of its feet off my chest. Having her in my corner, and Tom in my corner as well, means a lot to me, and even though I basically just got it absolutely confirmed that Luke is sleeping with Amy, I kind of already knew that anyway. So now it's just a question of how to proceed. Tom has already volunteered to submit his DNA so I can compare it to Luke's, and both he and Sophie advise me not to tell Luke and Amy when I do this, which I agree with. They're both completely on my side, which means more to me than I can ever express to them. Tom has also been trying to set up a camera in Amy's room to catch her and Luke in the act. Sophie told me flat out that I needed to divorce her dad, and hearing that from my own daughter made it clearer than it's ever been. She's right. Comments. Comment 1. Okay doke. Tom and Sophie have to be sitting on the couch when Luke comes home and drops the bomb that Sophie is pregnant. Or, to say that they had the same thoughts and did their own DNA tests and surprise, you are the father of. Actually, that was something they had considered doing before. Now that the three of us are on the same page, it's not the worst idea. Comment 2. Why not just DNA test the two kids against each other and stop dragging it out? The test will let you know if they share the same father, and then it would be clear your husband is the father of both. Comment 3. Getting 2 ancestry test kits is simple. They are on Amazon. Comment 4. I don't even care if it's fictional or not, these updates have me hooked. Comment 5. I finally understand why my granny used to watch those god-awful drama shows. It's super fake, but damn if it isn't entertaining. These posts are just new age soaps. I am not the OOP. Please do not harass the OOP.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.